Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is part 1 of our story. If you like this What If story and want to see part 2, let me know in the comments below. Before we start, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. Also, check the description for more great content and my playlist. This story was posted by 𝐒𝐮𝐬 on Wattpad. Now let's start. Izuku watched as Kacchan had been unkind to him ever since he discovered that Izuku was quirkless. However, Izuku remained optimistic, knowing that Kacchan possessed an incredible quirk and would undoubtedly become a great hero one day, with Izuku right behind him. As he walked out of school, he realized he hadn't seen Kacchan much that day and began to wonder where he could be. Suddenly, a cry followed by a small explosion caught his attention. Izuku knew exactly where Kacchan was. He rushed toward the source of the commotion, dropping his backpack as he arrived. Without hesitation, he positioned himself between Kacchan and the kid on the ground. He felt a surge of determination as he spoke up, urging Kacchan to stop. Kacchan snarled, and his friends laughed mockingly. Izuku stood firm, arms outstretched, despite feeling a tremor of fear at Kacchan's fierce tone. Kacchan shouted for him to move aside, and Izuku braced himself, closing his eyes in anticipation of the explosion he feared would come. But when he opened his eyes, he was surprised to see Kacchan's palm just inches from his face, with nothing happening. The confusion on Kacchan's face was evident as Izuku's hair fell over his eyes. Seizing the moment, Izuku dashed away, realizing that the other kid he had been protecting had already escaped. As he sprinted back, a realization struck him. He had a quirk. He couldn't contain his joy as he celebrated this newfound ability. Later, at the doctor's office, the doctor smiled as he explained that Izuku was indeed a special case. Despite having 2 joints in his pinky toe, Izuku had developed a very useful quirk. The doctor announced that they had named it 𝗟𝗟, handing a sheet of paper to 𝐒𝐮𝐬, who accepted it with tears of joy in her eyes. The doctor explained that this quirk allowed Izuku to erase someone's quirk as long as they were within a 10-meter radius and he had seen them once. The details were outlined on the sheet he had given 𝐒𝐮𝐬. Excitement bubbled within Izuku as he eagerly asked what his quirk could do. The doctor chuckled at his enthusiasm and elaborated on the abilities and limitations of 𝗟𝗟. After the appointment, the Midoriyas returned home, with 𝐒𝐮𝐬 expressing her gratitude to the doctor through her joyful tears. As they approached the end of middle school, Izuku sat at his desk, lost in thought before the teacher arrived. The news of his quirk had spread quickly, and his classmates had begun to treat him more neutrally. Suddenly, a hand slammed down on his desk, and he recognized Kacchan immediately. Kacchan asked if Izuku had signed up for you? To which Izuku replied affirmatively. Kacchan declared that he would dominate Izuku in the future. As the teacher entered the classroom, he seemed indifferent at first, but then he dramatically announced that they would be discussing their career paths. He leaped onto his desk, asking if all the students wanted to be heroes. The classroom erupted with excitement as students showcased their quirks, except for Izuku, who simply smiled and raised his fist lazily. Kacchan shouted that they would be the only ones to get into you, prompting the other students to murmur in admiration for the 2 aspiring heroes. At the end of the day, Izuku was walking along since Katsuki had left earlier to get a head start on his training for you. Lost in thought, he softly mumbled as he tried to plan out his training for the entrance exams. Suddenly, he heard a sinister laugh and turned just in time to see a monstrous sludge creature reaching for him. He quickly stepped back and activated his quirk. His hair lifted as if floating in water, and the villain froze, confusion and frenzy evident in its eyes. Izuku focused on the creature's gaze, then quickly grabbed a pebble, determined to act. He thought to himself that he didn't have enough time to run, so he needed to create an opportunity. With a swift motion, he threw the rock directly at the center of the villain's left eye. As he deactivated his quirk and prepared to turn away, he felt the creature's slime grip his arm. The villain boasted about its power, but before it could finish, a powerful gust of wind slammed Izuku against the tunnel wall, followed by an eerie silence. Concerned for him, a voice asked if he was okay. Izuku looked up, his tired eyes sparkling with awe. It was All Might, the pro hero, striking a proud pose. All Might declared his intent to capture the slippery villain before it could escape again. He grabbed 2 soda bottles and began scooping the sludge into them. Turning to Izuku, All Might was slightly surprised to see the boy holding out a notepad and pen. Izuku eagerly requested an autograph. All Might accepted the items and, with a smile, asked for the boy's name. Izuku proudly introduced himself as Izuku Midoriya. The hero quickly signed the notepad, aware that he needed to leave soon. With a cheerful farewell, All Might jumped away, leaving Izuku standing there, beaming like the huge hero fan he was. Toshinori's perspective shifted as he soared through the air, feeling his limits approaching as he landed on a rooftop. Steam billowed off him as he sighed, realizing it was time to deliver the captured villain to the police. He reached for the villain strapped to his side, but to his dismay, he felt nothing. Panic set in as he began patting himself down, only to discover that he had dropped the villain. In a moment of distress, he coughed, feeling the weight of his exhaustion. Izuku felt exhilarated. It was the best day ever. All Might had signed his notepad, and he couldn't help but think that if Eraserhead showed up, he would be ready to face anything. His smile was wide, and he walked with a bounce in his step. Suddenly, a loud explosion echoed through the air, and a plume of smoke rose in the distance. Without a second thought, he dashed toward the scene. Moments earlier, Katsuki was taking a shortcut home through a wide alley, lost in thought about his training. He kicked a soda bottle absent-mindedly, sending the cap flying off as it struck a pole. He grumbled to himself about needing to improve his fighting skills without relying solely on his quirk, knowing that Izuku could easily take advantage of him in a fight. As he continued down the alley, he noticed movement near the wall. A pile of sludge began to form, rising ominously. The creature lunged at him, and Katsuki barely had time to react. Izuku arrived at the scene alongside a skeletal figure, recognizing it as the villain that All Might had previously captured. The skeletal hero felt a pang of worry, realizing he had dropped the villain, putting someone else in danger. The crowd murmured anxiously about the powerful quirk at play and why the heroes weren't intervening, noting that the villain's quirk was causing chaos. Determined to help, Izuku pushed through the crowd, apologizing as he went. When he reached the front, he spotted Katsuki trapped, fear evident in his eyes. Without thinking, Izuku rushed toward the villain, activating his quirk to erase Katsuki's powers and stun the sludge creature. He threw his backpack at the villain's eye and quickly deactivated his quirk. Grabbing Katsuki's collar, he attempted to pull him free, but it was no use. Panic set in as he feared for both their safety. Just when despair threatened to overwhelm him, a powerful wind swept through, and a strong hand pulled both him and Katsuki to safety. It was All Might who set them down as other heroes rushed over. He instructed them to clean up the villain quickly, noting its tricky nature. As the heroes began their work, Kamui Woods and Death Arms praised Katsuki for his quirk's power and Izuku for his quick thinking. Katsuki begrudgingly thanked Izuku for saving him but quickly added that it didn't mean he was better. He stormed off, leaving Izuku chuckling at the exchange. All Might then called out to Izuku, grabbing his shoulders and urging him to follow him into a dark alley. Izuku felt a mix of confusion and excitement as he followed. Suddenly, All Might transformed, leaving behind a skeletal figure. Izuku gasped, surprised by the change. All Might quickly shushed him, explaining that this was his true form and revealing details about his injury and quirk. He commended Izuku for his bravery in rushing to save his friend without waiting for a pro hero. Izuku stammered, unsure of how to respond, but All Might encouraged him, emphasizing that many heroes acted on instinct in critical moments. He invited Izuku to meet him at Dagobah Beach the next morning for training, and Izuku eagerly accepted, promising not to disappoint. The following day, All Might guided Izuku through the process of inheriting One for All and the challenges that lay ahead. They pushed his body to its limits, and All Might provided valuable tips to help him train his quirk. Izuku's mother, 𝐒𝐮𝐬, noticed his exhaustion but chose not to question him, already aware of the demands of his training. Izuku's abilities improved significantly. His range of 𝐿 increased to 30 meters, allowing him to erase quirks from multiple targets simultaneously. His physical strength surpassed Katsuki's, and he learned to 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐲 a portion of one for all without fully activating it. As the entrance exam approached, Izuku found himself racing against time. He had received one for all just a week prior and had been practicing to control its power. Despite All Might's encouragement to rest, Izuku overslept on the day of the exam. He hurriedly prepared, barely glancing at his hair, and shouted a quick goodbye to his mother before sprinting off with all his might, even activating one for all to run faster, breaking the rules in his urgency. When he reached the gates, he took a moment to catch his breath, noticing many kids still entering the school. A familiar voice called out to him, and he felt a hand clasp his shoulder. He turned to see the boy he hadn't seen in months. Katsuki exclaimed that Izuku looked extremely tired, questioning whether he had slept at all. Izuku explained that he had been training his quirk. Katsuki patted Izuku's back, and they walked toward the school entrance side by side. However, lost in thought or perhaps due to his fatigue, Izuku tripped. Accepting his fate, he closed his eyes, but instead of hitting the ground, he felt a hand on his back. He opened his eyes to see the girl who had helped him earlier. She remarked that it would be bad luck if he fell. As she helped him to his feet, Izuku felt a blush creep onto his face, aware of his awkwardness around girls. She put her fingertips together and said, "Release," and Izuku felt his weight return. Just as she seemed about to speak, Katsuki interrupted, grabbing Izuku and urging him to move along. As they walked away, Izuku waved lazily over his shoulder. The explanation in the testing zone was rather dull, and Izuku would have preferred not to have a loud robot yelling at the most famous screamer in Japan. Katsuki and Izuku had to separate since they were in different testing zones, but Izuku planned to check on Katsuki's results afterward. Spotting the girl who had helped him earlier, he decided to thank her, but a hand blocked his path. The loud robot questioned what he was doing there, implying he was interfering with the other contestants. Izuku felt the eyes of the other participants on him, sensing that they thought he was a distraction. Before he could respond, the robot shouted for everyone to start, urging them to run as there were no countdowns in real fights. Realizing he was already behind, Izuku dashed inside. He leaped off his right leg, activating his quirk at 5%, and landed on a one-pointer that had just crashed through a building, causing it to collapse. He noticed a blonde boy nearby who looked surprised but quickly regained his composure. Izuku acknowledged him with a tired thanks before taking off again. He found himself between a three-pointer and a two-pointer. The three-pointer turned toward him first. He punched its head with 5% of his quirk and swiftly sucked the power to his leg, kicking the two-pointer into a wall. He noted his score of 6 points. With time running out, Izuku felt a sense of urgency and began to run faster. He encountered a one-pointer and slammed his foot into its back, sending it flying apart. He was aware of the girl using her quirk to take down several robots, and he was astonished to hear her score of 28 points. Just then, a loud explosion shook the area, and he looked up to see a massive shadow looming over him. A zero-pointer, far larger than he expected, slammed its fist down, creating a gust of wind that swept past him. As everyone rushed out of the dust, he noticed the rude robot from earlier running past and heard him shout about the time remaining. Feeling the pressure of the ticking clock, Izuku decided he needed more points. However, his attention was drawn to the girl, who was trapped under some rubble. Realizing he couldn't waste time, he sprinted toward the robot. As he activated his quirk, he felt a surge of power in his legs. He aimed a punch at the robot, but his strength was overwhelming. The robot's head exploded in a series of blasts, and Izuku felt the pain hit him all at once. His legs were injured, but his arm only felt strained. He cried out in agony as he began to fall. In that moment, he felt a jolt and found himself floating above the ground. The girl was there, using her quirk to help him. Tears filled his eyes as he realized the extent of his injuries and his lack of points. He placed his head on the pavement, feeling defeated as he acknowledged his score of only 7 points. As the time ran out, he sighed and closed his eyes, succumbing to exhaustion and pain. It had been a week since Izuku had failed the entrance exams. He had graded himself on the written portion and received a decent score, but that was overshadowed by the disappointing 7 points he earned in the practical exam. His mother called out to him, expressing concern about his unusual smile while he stared at the fish. He quickly reassured her that he was fine and returned to his meal. After finishing, he moved to the couch, absent-mindedly using his grip strengthener. Thoughts of Kacchan flooded his mind. They hadn't spoken since the exam, and he hadn't been able to reach 𝐼𝐻𝐷 either. The weight of disappointment settled heavily on him, making him feel as if 𝐼𝐻𝐷 regretted giving him one for all. His mother's hopeful voice broke through his thoughts, reminding him that the results should arrive soon. He nodded, though his heart felt heavy. She expressed pride that he had even applied to you, but he knew she was unaware of the true nature of his connection with 𝐼𝐻𝐷. He felt a pang of guilt for keeping such a significant secret. Just then, the living room door burst open, and his mother rushed in, holding a bloated envelope. Excitement filled her voice as she announced that it had arrived. Izuku took the envelope from her and asked if he could check it alone, to which she agreed. He stared at the envelope for what felt like an eternity, unable to bring himself to open it. The fear of rejection loomed over him. Finally, he decided to face it and tore the envelope open. A metal object fell onto his desk, and as it settled, a blue light emanated from the top. 𝐼𝐻𝐷's projection appeared, congratulating him on his acceptance. Izuku was stunned, realizing that 𝐼𝐻𝐷 had come to work at you. He listened intently as 𝐼𝐻𝐷 explained that he had been unable to contact him due to paperwork. The news of his failure stung, but 𝐼𝐻𝐷 continued, revealing that the entrance exam was not solely based on villain points. A video played, showing a girl who had tried to negotiate for him after the exam. She described him and expressed her longing to give him some of her points, passionately arguing that he deserved them for his actions during the exam. Izuku felt a mix of emotions as she spoke, realizing the kindness she was showing him. 𝐼𝐻𝐷 affirmed that her actions were commendable and that the entrance exam considered rescue points as well. The leaderboard displayed Izuku's score, showing him at number 5 with 7 villain points and 60 rescue points. The girl, 𝐼𝐻𝐿 𝐻𝐬, was also acknowledged for her contributions. With a smile, 𝐼𝐻𝐷 declared that they both passed. Tears of joy streamed down Izuku's face as he felt a wave of relief and happiness wash over him. 𝐼𝐻𝐷 encouraged him, proclaiming that this was his hero academia. After a few moments, Izuku composed himself and opened the door to find his mother waiting anxiously. The moment their eyes met, genuine joy radiated from him, and she couldn't help but tear up at the sight of his smile. The night after receiving the letter, 𝐼𝐻𝐷 contacted him. Izuku rushed to the beach, nearly screaming out to him but holding back due to the presence of a couple nearby. He approached 𝐼𝐻𝐷, tears forming in his tired eyes. 𝐼𝐻𝐷 congratulated him on his acceptance and offered a high five, which Izuku eagerly returned. He expressed gratitude, and 𝐼𝐻𝐷 reassured him that he hadn't mentioned their connection to the school, respecting Izuku's longing for fairness. Izuku was surprised to learn that 𝐼𝐻𝐷 had been offered a teaching position at 𝐻𝐬. While searching for a successor, he felt a mix of emotions, realizing that 𝐼𝐻𝐷 had intended to pass on one for all to a student with a powerful quirk. Izuku then confessed that during the exam, he felt he had lost control of one for all when he faced the 0-pointer. He suggested that perhaps 𝐼𝐻𝐷 should consider giving the quirk to someone with a similar ability. That cannot be helped. The mentor did not want someone who could handle the power instantly if they did not possess the qualities that mattered. It did not matter if the young hero could never control it, because he had what truly counted, a hero's heart. The young hero felt a slight sting in his eyes and closed them momentarily. The mentor's attempt to lighten the mood brought a lazy smile to his face as he thought, at least it all turned out all right. The mentor picked up 2 gas cans and explained that when the young hero learned to truly control one for all, he would be able to use it throughout his body at whatever power he could handle. The mentor elaborated that the more he built a vessel, the more freely the power could flow. With a display of strength, the mentor crushed the 2 cans effortlessly, showcasing his might. The couple on the dock must have seen him, and the young hero felt a rush of excitement. They sprinted away down the beach, eager to continue their journey. The young hero realized he was going to be late and felt lost. His mother had been double-checking everything, and while he appreciated her concern, it made him rush. He was supposed to head to room 1A but had not been given a map or any direction. He looked at the room numbers, hoping he was going the right way. Thankfully, he managed to find 1A and gawked at the door, noting the accommodations for quirks. With a sigh, he opened the door, hoping the rude robot wouldn't be there. Inside, a voice reprimanded someone for putting their feet on the desk. The young hero watched in amusement, recognizing the familiar tone. The rude robot introduced himself as 𝐼𝐻𝐬, seemingly realizing he had forgotten to do so. The young hero noted the elite background of 𝐻𝐬 and felt a competitive spark. Kacchan, the familiar rival, looked displeased as he noticed the young hero's presence. The classroom turned to him, and he offered a tired wave, feeling overwhelmed by the attention. 𝐻𝐬 approached the young hero, acknowledging his earlier misjudgment and admitting that the young hero was better than him. The young hero felt a mix of emotions, realizing he had not truly grasped the situation. Suddenly, a bubbly voice interrupted, recognizing him by his curly hair. The young hero turned to see a girl in uniform who complimented his earlier actions. He felt a blush rise as she praised him for speaking to the others in person. A bored voice interrupted their conversation, and the young hero turned to see a figure lounging in a sleeping bag. The sight of Eraserhead made him feel faint, while 𝐻𝐬 and the girl appeared horrified. Eraserhead stood up, commenting on their lack of rationality and introducing himself as their homeroom teacher. The young hero straightened up, trying to calm his nerves. The teacher instructed them to change into gym suits and head out to the field. In the changing room, the young hero felt the weight of the stares from his peers, a blush creeping onto his face. He and Kacchan walked out together, noticing that most of the other boys avoided them. They gathered where the teacher instructed, eager to learn what was in store for them. The teacher announced a quirk assessment test, surprising the students who had expected a more leisurely start. He explained that if they wanted to become heroes, they did not have time for such events. The young hero understood the urgency, while others seemed taken aback. The teacher emphasized that the country still used averages from students not using their quirks, which was not rational. The teacher called on Kacchan, asking about his best result in the softball throw from junior high. Kacchan stepped into the circle, ready to demonstrate his abilities. With a calm demeanor, he prepared to throw, and as he did, an explosion erupted, showcasing his immense power. The reading shocked everyone as Kacchan achieved an impressive distance. Excitement filled the air, and the young hero felt a mix of anticipation and concern. The teacher's demeanor shifted as he warned them that whoever came in last overall would face expulsion. The young hero felt a chill run down his spine, realizing the stakes were higher than he had anticipated. The kid was quite skilled at taking down bots, but honestly, I didn't think he could push back a 0-pointer. That was when I realized he had to be 𝐼𝐻𝐬's secret pupil. It confirmed my suspicion that he was my child. There was no way 𝐼𝐻𝐬 could find another kid with an Erasure-based quirk in such a short time before asking me for help. Midoriya was 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐽's maiden name, which we changed to her fake husband's name to protect her and Izuku from any villains. Being an underground hero doesn't attract much public attention, but it certainly draws the attention of villains when you're one of the best. Now my secret child was destined to become the next symbol of peace, and 𝐒𝐮𝐽 and I hadn't even revealed the truth to him yet. As a teacher, I couldn't afford to show favoritism. It would seem too sudden and suspicious if I treated him better than the other students, especially since only 𝐻𝐬 knew about this. I would have to test him like everyone else. Izuku observed the scene with a mix of fear and determination as 𝐼𝐻𝐬 made his declaration. The atmosphere shifted as 𝐼𝐻𝐬 explained that they were free to act on the circumstances of their students. He welcomed them to 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐬𝐃𝐞𝐭 hero course, and a tense silence followed until 𝐿𝐼𝐻𝐬 voiced her concern about the unfairness of potential expulsion on the first day. 𝐼𝐻𝐬 explained the unpredictability of natural disasters, accidents, and villains, emphasizing that heroes were the ones who needed to tackle such challenges. He warned them that 𝐻𝐬 would present them with one hardship after another for the next 3 years, urging them to go beyond and overcome it with all they had. A newfound sense of competitiveness filled the room as some students began to stretch and prepare mentally. Out of the corner of Izuku's eye, he noticed Kacchan smirking at him as he stretched. The first test was the 50-meter dash. It was a race between Izuku and Kacchan, who remained stoic, confident in his victory. When the signal was given, they both took off, Izuku using one for all to propel himself while Kacchan unleashed explosions to gain speed. They crossed the finish line almost simultaneously, with the robot announcing their times. They exchanged competitive glances, Kacchan smirking while Izuku wore a triumphant smile. The second test was grip strength. Izuku stood near the wall, quietly achieving a grip of 529 kilograms. He looked up to see a purple-haired student and another with a unique quirk in front of a multi-armed student. The multi-armed student demonstrated impressive strength, and the comments exchanged among the students added a light-hearted atmosphere. The third test was the standing long jump, where the blonde student and Kacchan soared over the sand pit using their quirks. Izuku quickly used one for all in his right leg to jump over the pit. During the fourth test, the repetitive side steps, Izuku was surprised by the creativity displayed by the purple-haired student, who used his quirk in unexpected ways. Izuku almost considered interfering by erasing his quirk. The fifth test was the ball throw. 𝐼𝐼𝐼𝐿 amazed everyone by throwing the ball an incredible distance. Izuku stepped into the circle, focusing on the ball in his hand. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and prepared to throw. Suddenly he felt a wave of pressure, and before he could react, a capture weapon wrapped around him, forcing him to turn. Aizawa confronted him, suggesting that he had been holding back. Izuku was taken aback but determined to prove himself. He was instructed to use his full power, and Aizawa's unsettling smirk only fueled his resolve. With a fierce glare, Izuku activated his quirk, feeling the energy surge through him. He threw the ball with all his might, the energy radiating from his fingertip as he released it. As the ball soared through the air, Izuku felt the strain on his finger, but he pushed through the pain. He turned to Aizawa, his eyes glowing with determination. He asked how much of a liability he truly was, tears of frustration and triumph glistening in his eyes. Aizawa checked his device and revealed the impressive distance, leaving Izuku feeling a mix of anger and pride. As Izuku deactivated his quirk and applied eye drops to soothe his eyes, he reflected on his actions. Unbeknownst to him, the other students were in awe, especially as they wondered where he had gotten the eye drops. The results were displayed on the board, and everyone stared in disbelief. Mineta, who had struggled in most tests, looked devastated. Just as the mood shifted, Aizawa casually mentioned that he had been lying about the expulsion, leaving everyone in a state of shock. It was a calculated deception to draw out the upper limits of their quirks. With a creepy smile, Aizawa presented this idea, causing everyone to react in disbelief. The protagonist felt a mix of confusion and admiration. Eraserhead was their second favorite hero after All Might, and his track record as a teacher was well known. Last year, he had expelled an entire class on the first day for similar reasons. Did this mean he saw potential in all of them, even in 𝗟𝗶𝗸? That thought was exciting. Exhausted and alone, the protagonist walked out of the classroom. Just then, Iida placed a hand on their shoulder, asking if their finger was all right. The protagonist reassured him that Recovery Girl had healed it. As they continued walking, Iida began to share his thoughts about what had happened with Aizawa. Though Iida might come off as blunt, he was genuinely earnest, and the protagonist couldn't fault him for that. Suddenly, a cheerful voice called out to them, asking if they were heading to the station. They turned to see 𝐼𝐼𝐼𝐿 approaching, and the protagonist smiled at her. Iida acknowledged her with a somewhat stiff greeting. 𝐼𝐼𝐼𝐿 introduced herself, and then turned to the protagonist, confirming their identity. The protagonist chuckled slightly, explaining that Deku was a nickname given by Kacchan when they were younger, meaning useless. They revealed their real name was Izuku. 𝐼𝐼𝐼𝐿 apologized for the misunderstanding but noted that Deku also sounded like the Japanese phrase for, "you can do it," which she found appealing. The protagonist felt their face heat up and requested that she call them Deku. Iida, confused, pointed out that accepting the nickname so easily seemed odd, given its original meaning. The protagonist covered their eyes with a hand, contemplating the situation. It felt like a Copernican revolution, a shift in perspective that was both bewildering and enlightening. 𝐼𝐼𝐼𝐿, puzzled, asked for clarification, prompting the protagonist to prepare an explanation about their costume. Since he had a quirk, he put a lot of thought into every detail of his costume. The lenses of his goggles would change when his eyes glowed with Erasure, shifting to pitch black. He had considered incorporating metal braces from his gamma suit earlier, knowing he would need to fight with his quirk. It was convenient that the fighting style he desired fit perfectly with One for All. Izuku hated English. Present Mike being the teacher wasn't too bad, and he was quite proficient in the subject, but when Mike wanted to, he could be incredibly loud. The curriculum was standard for a high school, but Izuku sensed that most of his classmates were surprised by its normalcy. Kacchan seemed bored with the classes. He was smart, after all, and Izuku understood his frustration. He, however, enjoyed school and didn't find it dull. 𝐿 offered gourmet food at reasonable prices. Lunch Rush was the main chef, and even if not everyone understood how he earned his hero status, Izuku thought he was a cool hero. He walked around the cafeteria, engaging with the students. The afternoon brought the class everyone was eagerly anticipating, Hero Basic Training. A voice dramatically announced from the other side of the door, and Izuku smiled, recognizing it. All Might entered, striking a dramatic pose in the doorway, and excitement filled the room. Students buzzed about the symbol of peace, and All Might walked up to the podium, perhaps a bit nervous for his first teaching session. He explained that Hero Basic Training involved various methods to learn the fundamentals of being a hero, and that it would be the subject with the most units. He fidgeted, preparing for a dramatic reveal. "Let's get right into it. This is what we'll do today," he exclaimed, holding up a card that read, Battle. Combat Training. Kacchan looked thrilled at this announcement. All Might pointed to the wall, where panels slid open to reveal columns of suitcases labeled with numbers. Costumes made based on your quirk registrations and requests you submitted before school started. Izuku suddenly remembered that he had forgotten to submit his own request. He put his forehead against his desk, feeling frustrated. He looked up at the suitcases, realizing they must have created one for him based on his quirk. After changing, he gathered with the others in ground beta. He received a note inside his suitcase that nearly brought him to tears. His mom had known he would forget something as simple as the quirk registration and costume design, so she had submitted the detailed sketches of his hero costume along with his quirk paper. She even updated his quirk to reflect that it was a split quirk, granting him superhuman enhancements. He felt grateful for her support. As he looked around, he noticed he was alone in the locker room. He hurried through the tunnel to ground beta, adjusting the goggles on his head as he ran. When he emerged, 𝐿𝐼𝐼𝐼 spotted him first. She approached him, and he was momentarily taken aback by her costume, which was quite form-fitting. She complimented him on his costume, saying it looked cool and down-to-earth. He felt a bit shy and looked away, admitting that he should have specified what he wanted, as his costume ended up being a skin-tight bodysuit. 𝗟𝗶𝗸 chimed in, expressing his enthusiasm for the hero course. Izuku felt confused by the sudden shift in conversation. All Might announced that it was time for combat training. Iida quickly raised his hand, asking if they would be conducting urban battles again, referencing the battle center from the entrance exams. All Might clarified that they would be advancing 2 steps. He explained that while most battles with villains occurred outside, intelligent villains often hid indoors. He coughed slightly, looking down as he spoke about the reality of their society filled with heroes. For this class, they would be split into heroes and villains for 2-on-2 indoor battles. The frog girl questioned how they would conduct battles without basic training, to which All Might responded that this was a real battle to understand those basics. He emphasized that there would be no robots to defeat this time. Questions flew from the students, including concerns about potential punishment and how teams would be divided. Izuku noticed All Might's overwhelmed expression and cheekily suggested he might need to address all the questions at once. All Might chuckled lightly and assured them he would answer everything, pulling out a script to explain the process. Izuku thought the situation felt very American, smiling slightly. Teams and opponents would be determined by drawing lots, and Iida expressed concern about the randomness of the selection. Izuku, with a twinkle in his eye, pointed out that pros often had to form makeshift teams with heroes from other agencies, making the randomness sensible. 𝐿𝐬 acknowledged this with a bow, apologizing for his earlier rudeness. All Might encouraged them to proceed quickly, raising a fist in excitement. The teams were picked, and the training was about to begin. 𝗟𝗏 and the narrator are Team A, while Team B consists of a formidable ice user and an octopus-themed hero. Team C features a character known for their inappropriate behavior and a girl in a revealing costume. Team D is made up of Kacchan and 𝐿𝐬, who the narrator believes will undoubtedly fail. Team E includes a girl with pink hair and a boy who can shoot lasers. Team F consists of a quiet rock user and a big-lipped character resembling a banana. Team G features a girl with blonde hair and a black streak, along with a character with earjacks. Team H includes a bird-themed hero and a frog girl. Team I consists of a floating glove user and a character with a tail, while Team J features a hero with unusual elbows and a spiky red head. The narrator feels a rush of excitement and confidence, believing it must be fate. They blush and nod in agreement with 𝐿𝐬. All Might announces the first teams to fight, revealing that Team A will be the heroes and Team D will be the villains. He instructs everyone else to head toward the monitor room. The villain team is told to enter first and set up, with the hero team expected to break in shortly. The narrator prepares by putting on goggles and a mouth cover, closing their eyes to think of a plan. 𝗟𝗏 asks if they have a strategy, and the narrator explains their plan to deal with Kacchan and 𝐿𝐬. They anticipate that Kacchan will rush in, ignoring 𝐿𝐬, who will be focused on protecting the bomb. The narrator plans to hold Kacchan off while 𝗟𝗏 goes for the bomb. All Might announces the start of the indoor combat training, and the narrator and 𝗟𝗏 successfully infiltrate through a window. They proceed cautiously, aware of the many blind spots. As they navigate a dark hallway, the narrator mentally prepares for the confrontation with Kacchan. Suddenly, Kacchan leaps out from a side alley, ready to unleash an explosion. The narrator quickly dodges, pulling 𝗟𝗏 out of harm's way. They land safely, and the narrator checks on 𝗟𝗏, who is fine but notices a few scratches on their own face. Kacchan clears the smoke and challenges the narrator, who responds with confidence, pointing out Kacchan's predictable attack pattern. As Kacchan charges, the narrator uses their quirk to counter his explosive attack, landing a punch that sends Kacchan crashing to the ground. The narrator remarks on Kacchan's fighting style, and Kacchan, catching his breath, acknowledges the narrator's newfound confidence but insists it won't change the outcome of the battle. Kacchan calls out for 𝗟𝗏 to take action as he launches another attack. The narrator blocks Kacchan's strike and retaliates, using their quirk to gain the upper hand. As the fight intensifies, the narrator reflects on their strategy and the need to keep moving. Kacchan's frustration grows as he tries to provoke the narrator, but they remain focused on the mission. 𝗟𝗏 communicates that she has found the bomb, and the narrator prepares to assist her. However, Kacchan's determination escalates as he reveals the full extent of his explosive quirk. He threatens to use a powerful attack, and the narrator braces for impact. A massive explosion ensues, engulfing the area in flames. As the smoke clears, the narrator finds themselves disoriented but determined to continue the fight. Kacchan approaches with a fierce expression, declaring his intent to make the narrator surrender. The narrator stands tall, ready to face Kacchan head-on, expressing their longing to settle things with a fair fight. Kacchan charges forward, and the battle continues with renewed intensity. He seemed to have thrown away his knowledge of Izuku's base quirk. Izuku activated 𝗟𝗏, and Kacchan's momentum kept him coming forward. Izuku swung for Kacchan's face without using one for all, but Kacchan caught his fist, slamming his feet into Izuku's stomach. The impact knocked the wind out of him, and Kacchan used the moment to plant his feet and throw Izuku into the wall to his left. Izuku slammed into the wall, causing 𝗟𝗏 to deactivate on impact, and he fell to the floor. As he stood up, Kacchan approached. Izuku looked down and thought about how Kacchan had seemingly thought of everything to counter him. He mused that it was too bad he had also prepared. That was a blatant lie, knowing One for All would have a strong presence. He had added a note after All Might visited him, making his suit explosion-proof and impact-resistant. He hadn't had Kacchan in mind at all. Izuku looked up and sent a punch at Kacchan, using 5% of his power. the wind from the punch making Kacchan fly back. He activated 𝗟𝗟 again and jumped at Kacchan, pulling out the capture tape and unwinding plenty of it at once. He moved his hands a couple of times, making the tape circle around Kacchan. Azui, referring to Izuku, commented that he kind of looked like Mr. Aizawa as the class watched the battle. Denki expressed his nervousness, saying it was kind of scary. Izuku pulled the tape over Kacchan and tightened it, declaring him captured. He planted his feet down, stopping both himself and the wrapped-up Kacchan, making Kacchan land on his backside. After cutting and tying the tape, Izuku walked over to the windows. He called out to 𝗟𝗏, who responded enthusiastically. Izuku charged a 5% punch and launched it towards the ceiling, causing the windows around him to shatter in a circular pattern. He sat down to take a breather, confident that 𝗟𝗏 would do exactly what she needed to do. Soon enough, All Might's voice echoed through the speakers, announcing that the hero team had won. Izuku didn't feel like describing all the canon matches, so it was understood that they followed the same pattern as in canon. Yaoyorozu had a lot to say when they went over the match. Izuku had a hand on Kacchan's shoulder, quietly apologizing for how the match went. Kacchan acted mad and pretended to ignore him, but Izuku knew he was over it already. He was just being stubborn. He glanced at Iida, who looked completely different, pleased and honored, which was kind of adorable. Everyone seemed too focused on the matches, only moving from the screens to prepare for their own. The next day, Izuku opened the classroom door, almost late again due to some bothersome reporters outside the gates. A group of classmates instantly approached him, led by the spiky redhead. They praised him for his performance, expressing regret for not talking to him right after the match. They noted his dodging skills and how impressive it was that he fought evenly with Kacchan, who had ranked first in the entrance exam. Kirishima introduced himself, and others followed suit, each sharing their names and excitement about training together. 𝗟𝗏 appeared behind him, asking how he was doing. Izuku replied that he was fine, though she pointed out that he looked tired. He glanced at Kacchan, who was looking out the window, not being social as usual. They picked representatives, and Izuku quickly gave the title to Iida, recognizing his passion for school and doing what was best, especially after Iida proved himself during the intruder scare. They took a bus to an on-campus rescue training facility. Izuku felt excited to meet the third teacher Aizawa had mentioned and to be closer to becoming like All Might. He sat between Tsu and Sato, with Kirishima on the other side of Tsu. Mina was in front of him, sandwiched between Aoyama and a distracted Iida, with Kaminari beside Aoyama. Iida expressed disappointment about the bus seating arrangement, and Mina responded to his distressed voice. Tsu turned to Izuku, commenting that his quirk seemed like a mix of All Mights and Aizawas. Izuku was surprised and felt it was a compliment. Kirishima chimed in, suggesting that their quirks just looked similar, but he added that it was nice to have a powerful and flashy quirk like Izuku's. Izuku admired Kirishima's hardened arm, calling it cool and definitely professional. They discussed Kacchan's power and flashiness, and Izuku snickered softly, imagining Kacchan's usual angry demeanor. He covered his mouth to stifle his laughter, while Sato and Kaminari noticed his amusement. Tsu pointed out Kacchan, reinforcing the light-hearted banter among them. Kaminari looked at Kacchan with a mischievous grin and remarked on how surprising it was that everyone already recognized Kacchan's unpleasant personality. The laughter that erupted from the group was infectious, and the atmosphere at UA felt electric. The sound of genuine laughter filled the air as the teasing continued, and the joy of the moment was palpable. Aizawa, trying to regain control, reminded everyone that they had arrived and needed to focus. The class responded promptly, eager to follow his lead. Pro Hero 13, with a gentlemanly demeanor, announced that he had been waiting for them. 𝗟𝗏 bounced with excitement, expressing her admiration for 13, and the others shared in her enthusiasm. 13 gestured toward the entrance of the building, encouraging everyone to enter without delay, expressing eagerness to work with them. As they stepped inside, the class couldn't help but marvel at the facility, which resembled Universal Studio Japan. 13 explained that it was a training ground designed to simulate various accidents and disasters, known as the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, or USJ, for short. The class was captivated by the different sections of the facility, while 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐽 inquired about All Might, though the details faded from my mind as I absorbed the surroundings. 𝐼𝐼 began to speak again, listing several important points. He introduced his quirk, Black Hole, which could absorb anything and reduce it to dust. Uraraka nodded enthusiastically, recalling how 𝐼𝐼 had used his quirk to save people from disasters. However, 𝐼𝐼's tone shifted to a more serious note as he acknowledged the potential danger of his power. A sense of unease settled in my stomach, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something ominous was about to unfold. As the class cheered at the end of 𝐼𝐼's speech, the lights suddenly went out, plunging the facility into darkness. I instinctively put my mouth guard up, realizing I wasn't fully prepared for this unexpected turn. 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐽 glanced at me, sensing my heightened alertness. I noticed the fountain flicker, and as I stepped closer, a swirling purple mass began to form in front of it. I called out about the fountain, trying to maintain composure despite the knot tightening in my gut. 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐽's eyes widened as he turned to face the emerging threat. The purple mass shot out, revealing a hand. 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐽 commanded everyone to gather and stay still. I quickly moved beside Uraraka, ready to defend. I urged 𝐼𝐼 to protect the students as figures of various sizes and shapes emerged, each with their own quirks. Kirishima took a step forward, but I instinctively reached out to block him, warning him not to move. Those were real villains, I stated calmly, despite the turmoil inside me. The others gasped in shock, and 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐽 reinforced our warning, noting the irony that they had come just as they were meant to practice rescue operations. The tension in the air was thick, and the reality of the situation began to sink in. I know most people already recognize how the naval laser glowy man stares at the camera every moment he can, but rewatching it repeatedly is making me uneasy with his purple eyes staring blankly at me. Kirishima quietly questioned how the villains managed to infiltrate a hero school. I quickly turned to Kaminari, urging him to contact the school for immediate assistance. Yaoyorozu stepped up to address 𝐼𝐼, asking about the trespasser sensors. Todoroki speculated whether the villains had only appeared here or around the school, noting that the sensors not going off indicated they had someone with a quirk capable of bypassing them. The surprise attack was clearly well-planned, taking place in an area far from the main campus during a time when a class was supposed to be present. They may be foolish, but they are not without intelligence. 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐽 stepped closer to the giant stairs leading down to the mass of villains and jumped down. 𝐼𝐼 began shouting for us to evacuate quickly. We all rushed to the door, but we were halted by a pillar of purple mist forming in front of us, glowing yellow eyes staring down at us. The figure announced that they were the League of Villains and had invited themselves into the home of the heroes, a high school, with the intent of making All Might, the symbol of peace, take his last breath. I realized the gravity of their words. Did they come here to kill All Might? 𝐼𝐼 raised their hand, preparing to act, but before they could, Kacchan and Kirishima leaped at the mass. Kirishima threw a punch, and Kacchan unleashed a powerful explosion, but I sensed it wouldn't work. It felt as though 𝗟𝗟 couldn't affect him, suggesting he either had no physical form or it was hidden deep within the mist. Kirishima began to boast, but my anxiety kept me focused on the villain's response. The figure warned that even though we were students, we were still excellent targets. 𝐼𝐼 shouted for Kacchan and Kirishima to move away, and they realized their mistake just in time. The villain declared their intent to scatter us and cause us great suffering. Tentacles of purple mist shot out, creating a dome around us as the mist enveloped us. I closed my eyes, shielding my face with my arms. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself looking down at a blue sky, or rather, down at a body of water. I screamed as I fell a considerable distance into the shipwreck zone's ocean. I landed, trying to minimize the impact. As I looked around in the water, I wondered if this was a warp quirk. I swam toward the surface, trying not to dwell on how confident the villain was about killing All Might. Suddenly, a villain resembling a shark appeared in my line of sight. He charged at me, jaws wide open. I activated 𝗟𝗟, causing him to pause for a moment, but then 𝐼𝐶 came out of nowhere, slamming both her feet into the side of his head with her usual determined expression. She called out to me, and I let her tongue wrap around me as she launched off the villain, sending him flying in another direction. 𝐼𝐶 gently placed me onto a boat in the middle of the shipwreck zone. At least I knew where we were now. I sat up just in time to see 𝐼𝐴 being slammed onto the deck, clearly angering 𝐶. I would have laughed if the situation weren't so serious. I watched as 𝐶 climbed the ship and thanked her for her help. This situation had escalated quickly. I noted that the villains had clearly studied 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐻 schedule, and they must have been behind the media intrusion the other day to gather information. They were waiting for the perfect moment to strike, just as Todoroki had suggested. 𝐼𝐴 frantically interjected, insisting that All Might would arrive and defeat the villains. However, 𝐶 pointed out that they might have a plan to kill him. I looked at 𝐶, understanding her concern. Those villains had just threatened us with torture, and I wondered if we could hold out until All Might arrived. Even if he came, I questioned whether we would make it out safely. I stared at 𝐶, calming my mind and reminding myself that now was not the time to show weakness. 𝐼𝐴 suddenly exclaimed in panic, pointing at something. 𝐶 looked over the side of the boat, and I heard a villain yell from the water. They were circling the boat. 𝐼𝐴 shouted that there were too many of them. These villains wanted to eliminate All Might because he was the one and only symbol of peace, the one who deterred all evil. Memories of All Might flooded my mind. Him congratulating me for being accepted, coaching me, and encouraging me when I was cleaning the beach. I recalled my favorite video of All Might emerging from the rubble, proclaiming that everything was fine now that he was there, saving people with a proud smile. I didn't care about their reasoning. If those villains had a way to defeat All Might, then we needed to stop whatever they were planning. I looked at my friends with determination, declaring that we would fight and win. The students were separated and outnumbered by the villains surrounding them. Todoroki calmly froze those in his path, taunting them with a monotone voice. Kirishima and Katsuki were surrounded but easily took down anyone who dared to approach. Momo, Kaminari, and Jiraiya took fighting stances, ready to confront their opponents. Ojiro faced flames and a horde of villains, while Tokoyami and Koda found themselves surrounded as rain poured down on them. The other students stood their ground alongside 13, prepared for battle as Aizawa fought through the relentless wave of villains attacking him. Shoji calmly assessed the situation, asking if everyone was present. Ida, ever the responsible class representative, expressed his concern for their scattered classmates. Shoji reassured him that they were still in the building, prompting a collective sigh of relief among the students. However, their attention quickly shifted to the misty figure before them. Sato voiced his frustration, noting that physical attacks were ineffective against their opponent, who could manipulate their surroundings with ease. 13 turned to Ida, entrusting him with an important task. Ida was taken aback by the request to run to the school and alert them about the unfolding crisis. He explained that the alarms were silent and their phones were useless due to a quirk that interfered with communication. The misty figure loomed closer, its glowing yellow eyes fixed on them. 13 insisted that Ida would reach the school faster than they could locate the source of the interference. Despite his hesitation, Ida felt the weight of his responsibilities as class representative. Sato urged him to take action, emphasizing that alarms awaited outside. Shiro joined Sato, both ready to defend their classmates. 13 encouraged Ida to use his quirk to help others. With newfound determination, Ida prepared to sprint, his engines revving. The mist taunted them, questioning their strategy. 13, undeterred, unleashed their quirk, creating a powerful vortex that drew the mist in. Izuku, observing the chaos, felt a mix of fear and determination. 𝐼𝐴, overwhelmed, expressed his doubts about their chances against such formidable foes. Ignoring him, Izuku and 𝐶 focused on formulating an escape plan. They speculated that their opponents had gathered intelligence about the facility, but perhaps not about their quirks. 𝐶 noted that if they had known her abilities, she would have been placed in a more dangerous situation. Izuku shared details about his quirk, highlighting its limitations while acknowledging 𝐶's strength. 𝐼𝐴, feeling inadequate, lamented his own abilities. Just then, the boat they were on was suddenly sliced in half, sending 𝐼𝐴 into a panic. He mourned the loss of his belongings, while Izuku observed the cautious behavior of the sharks below, realizing they were not as reckless as they seemed. Amidst the turmoil, Izuku recalled All Might's words about seizing opportunities when the enemy felt secure. A risky plan formed in his mind, and despite his fear, he resolved to act. Channeling his inner Kacchan, he prepared to leap into action, determined to turn the tide of the battle. I hold out my left hand and grab my arm with my right, putting my middle finger and thumb together. The thought crosses my mind that I would have to use my full power for this, but I can't sacrifice my arm. There are more enemies outside of this zone. As I fall closer to the water, I charge one for all in my fingers and unleash a powerful attack. The impact creates a massive sinkhole in the water. 𝐶 responds with a rib bit, and I feel her tongue wrap around my torso as she jumps, dragging me through the air with her. I watch as 𝗟𝗶𝗸 yells something, and I see his belongings get swept away with the villains. Suddenly, the middle of the hole erupts with water. If a strong force is applied to the surface of the water, it will spread and then converge back in the middle. I catch a brief glimpse of the villains bound together by 𝗟𝗶𝗸's quirk before a massive pillar of water blasts into the air. 𝐶 remarks that we cleared the first hurdle, and I can't help but feel a surge of pride for our teamwork. As we walk to the edge of the shipwreck zone, I notice the mesh of villains stuck together, yelling near the nearly submerged ship. I walk beside 𝐶, who is dragging 𝗟𝗶𝗸 along. I am acutely aware of how lucky we were that the plan worked. 𝐶 turns to me, expressing concern about my muttering thoughts. She encourages me to focus on what to do next. I realize she is right and wince as pain washes over me, reminding me of my injured fingers. I look at my broken thumb and middle finger, my hand shaking from the pain. When 𝐶 asks if I am all right, I smile and try to protect my injured digits with my elbow guard. We agree that our priority should be to get help. It would be best to follow the shore and avoid the central plaza as we head toward the exit. I mention that Mr. 𝐒𝐻𝐬 has drawn a large number of villains to the plaza, and I worry that he may have overexerted himself by jumping into that crowd to protect us. 𝗟𝗟𝗻 reacts with alarm, calling me foolish for even considering it. I assure him that I am not planning to interfere, but I can't help but think that if we could find an opening to lessen Mr. 𝐒𝐻𝐬's load, even a little, it would help. I know it may be foolish, but I can't let Mr. 𝐒𝐻𝐬 face this alone. In the landside zone, 𝗏𝗏 observes the villains he has trapped with ice. He comments on their lack of direction with their quirks. As he walks onto the ice, one villain expresses shock at his presence. Another villain questions if he is really just a kid. 𝗏𝗏 continues past the frozen enemies, making his way toward the plaza. Suddenly, a man jumps out from behind a rock, brandishing a knife, while another approaches with a metal bow staff. In one fluid motion, 𝗏𝗏 freezes the first man and grabs the bow staff, using the opportunity to freeze both the staff and its wielder. He rips the staff from the man, causing him to fall, and warns the knife wielder that his cells will slowly die if he continues down this path. The bird-headed villain whimpers behind 𝗏𝗏, and the knife wielder begins to tear up. 𝗏𝗏 expresses his longing to be a hero and asks the villain what his plan is to defeat All Might. Meanwhile, a massive shroud of electricity is seen behind some mountains, but we return to the water scene. 𝗟𝗟𝗻 reassures me that we are just observing how things are going, and 𝐶 agrees with a worried 𝗟𝗶𝗸. We poke our heads out of the water to survey the plaza, where many unconscious villains are scattered across the ground. We watch as 𝐒𝐻𝐬 skillfully takes out 3 more villains. Suddenly, the handman rushes at 𝐒𝐻𝐬 with an outstretched hand. 𝐒𝐻𝐬 throws his capture weapon, which the handman catches. They charge at each other, and just before the handman can touch him, 𝐒𝐻𝐬 maneuvers under the outstretched arm and delivers a powerful elbow strike to the handman's stomach. 𝗟𝗟𝗻 makes an excited noise, but 𝐶 expresses concern as she notices the handman's grip on 𝐒𝐻𝐬's elbow. 𝐒𝐻𝐬's hair falls as the handman says something, and I see 𝐒𝐻𝐬's elbow begin to crumble away. I activate my quirk to stop the crumbling, causing the handman to falter in confusion. 𝐒𝐻𝐬 seizes the moment to break free and punches the man in the face. The handman stumbles back, but 𝐒𝐻𝐬's elbow continues to show signs of damage from the lingering effect of the villain's quirk. I deactivate my quirk and focus on 𝐒𝐻𝐬 as he gets surrounded by 3 goons. Just then, a large dark blue creature with a beak and an exposed brain appears behind him, declaring that it is not the last boss. The creature lifts a massive hand, reaching for 𝐼𝐬𝐽's head. I can't help but feel a sense of dread for Mr. 𝐼𝐬𝐽. The villain's voice trembled, acknowledging the hero's remarkable quirk. However, he pointed out that the hero specialized in rescuing people from disasters, noting that their battle experience was only half that of a typical hero. A warp gate materialized amidst the pull of the black holes, blending seamlessly with the villain's purple mist. Suddenly, another warp gate appeared behind 13, causing the hero to stumble in shock. The students watched in disbelief as 13's suit began to crack, ultimately disintegrating into dust. They stared at the scene before them, Mr. 𝐼𝐬𝐽 lying face down on the concrete while a monstrous figure loomed over him, holding his head down and twisting his arm at an unnatural angle. The concrete around 𝐼𝐬𝐽 was stained, a grim testament to the violence that had unfolded. The hand villain taunted 𝐼𝐬𝐽, revealing that he was the anti-symbol of peace, a bioengineered creature known as the 𝐼𝐻𝐬. The 𝐻𝐻𝐬 emitted a chilling sound, a mix between a raptor's screech and a human growl. In a swift motion, the beast twisted and broke 𝐼𝐬𝐽's right arm, eliciting a pained cry from the hero. The villain continued to mock him, claiming that despite his ability to erase quirks, he was no match for overwhelming power. 𝐼𝐬𝐽, determined, activated his erasure quirk, but before he could gain the upper hand, the 𝐻𝐻𝐬's foot came crashing down on his other arm. The creature then released 𝐼𝐬𝐽's right arm, seizing his head and slamming it back down. The students watched in horror, their expressions shifting to fearful shock. 𝐼𝐻𝐬𝐽, trembling, covered his mouth with gloved hands, while Tsuchan's eyes widened as she sank deeper into the water. 𝐼𝐻𝐽's muffled voice broke through the tension, expressing his inability to endure the scene any longer and questioning if Midoriya felt the same. Their words barely registered as a warp gate appeared next to the hand villain, revealing the misty figure of Tamura Shigaraki. The hand villain, presumably Shigaraki, turned to his companion, 𝐼𝐻𝐽, asking if 13 had been eliminated. 𝐻𝐻𝐽 confirmed that 13 was out of action but mentioned that some students had escaped. Shigaraki's demeanor shifted as he processed this information, expressing frustration at their situation. He scratched at his neck, his agitation growing, and declared that they couldn't win against the numerous pro-heroes present. He concluded that it was time to retreat. 𝐼𝐻𝐽's voice held a glimmer of hope as he noted that Shigaraki mentioned going home. Tsuchan, slightly slouched, echoed his sentiment with worry. 𝐼𝐻𝐽, overwhelmed with emotion, attempted to hug Tsuchan but accidentally crossed a line, prompting her to push him underwater. Midoriya shared Tsuchan's unease, recognizing that their enemies would not simply retreat after such an encounter. Shigaraki's next words sent a chill down Midoriya's spine as he turned to the students, declaring his intention to shatter the pride of the symbol of peace. In an instant he was upon them, reaching for Tsuchan's face. Memories of 𝐼𝐬𝐽's injury flooded Midoriya's mind, and he felt a surge of power. His arm shot forward, crackling with energy as he unleashed a powerful strike, sending the villains flying and shattering the lights around the dome. A cloud of smoke enveloped them, but Midoriya maintained focus on Shigaraki, drawing on his quirk. Despite the energy exerted, he noticed no shattered bones, realizing that the 𝐻𝐻𝐽 had absorbed the impact. He quickly retreated, redirecting his focus to Shigaraki, determined to erase his quirk. The 𝐻𝐻𝐽 regarded him with interest, questioning his allegiance to All Might. Midoriya, masking his fear, prepared for the next attack. The beast swung at him with incredible speed, but just as he braced for impact, the front doors of the facility exploded open, revealing a figure emerging from the dust. With a booming voice, the figure proclaimed that everything was fine. A large, toothy grin adorned his face as he announced his presence, declaring, "I am here." Tsuchan wrapped her tongue around Midoriya, pulling him away from the beast. He signaled for her and 𝐼𝐻𝐽 to join him while Shigaraki was distracted. Tsuchan hurried over, bringing the frightened 𝐼𝐻𝐽 along, and together they stood ready to face the impending threat. He never learns, she thought with a mental sigh. If Shigaraki noticed the students escaping, he didn't show it. Finally, the real hero joined the battle. All Might jumped down the steps, landing not far from the villain covered in hands. She quickly devised a plan and shared it with the two beside her, trusting that even though All Might had reached his limit, he could still handle the villains. 𝐿𝐮𝐲 and 𝗟𝗵𝗸 moved in a wide half-circle around the villains and hero, making their way toward Mr. Aizawa. She followed closely, her eyes glued to the match. They were saying something, but she couldn't hear them over the ringing in her ears and the pit forming in her stomach. Why did it feel like All Might wouldn't win this time? Turning, she helped the two lift Aizawa, careful not to cause him further harm. They walked toward the side stairs leading to the entrance, encountering no opposition. Upon reaching the entrance, they found 13 half-destroyed and a handful of their classmates. She noted the absence of some classmates but hoped they were okay. She had tried to erase the 𝐼𝐻𝐬's quirk when it began to fight All Might, but it was too powerful, possessing multiple quirks. Helplessly, she watched as All Might struggled against the beast, each punch landing slower than the last. Then Todoroki encased the 𝐼𝐻𝐬 in ice, causing it to go wild. Portals opened, limbs regrew rapidly, and the 𝐼𝐻𝐬 flew through the ceiling. A shot rang out. The pros had arrived. Tsuchan's eyes were filled with tears at their arrival. She placed a hand on Tsuchan's shoulder and offered a small smile, feeling too exhausted to be excited as the remaining villains retreated into a portal. They were given the next day off. When they returned to school, she didn't bother to hide the dark circles under her eyes. She hadn't slept at all. 𝗏𝗼𝐼𝐻𝐬 haunted her dreams, his quirk destructive and terrifying. She feared he could turn anyone or anything into dust, including her classmates, her mother, and All Might, all with just a touch. A hand landed on her shoulder, and she jumped, turning to see the owner. Her hair fell over her face, and she closed her eyes, apologizing to Tsuchan for her startled reaction. Tsuchan reassured her, expressing concern for her well-being. She smiled slightly in response, saying she was fine, just still shaken up. When Mr. Aizawa mentioned that the battle wasn't over yet, her heart raced. Was the league coming back? Was 𝗏𝗼𝐼𝐻𝐬 planning something? But then he revealed that the 𝐒𝐮𝐩𝐩 sports festival was just around the corner. She slammed her head against her desk in frustration. Iida questioned the wisdom of holding the festival so soon after a villain attack, but Mr. Aizawa explained that it was to demonstrate 𝐒𝐮𝐩𝐻's confidence in their new security measures. The sports festival was an important cultural event, akin to the Olympics, attracting attention from pros looking for potential sidekicks. It was too significant to cancel. Everyone prepared for the sports festival in their own ways. Some relaxed, some studied, and others focused on training. Izuku, however, stared at the wall with his quirk activated, keeping his eyes open for as long as possible while multitasking. It even intimidated Kacchan, but not Tsuchan, which was why Izuku found himself in her room again. She admired the soft hues of blue and green on Tsuchan's wall, easy on the eyes. They talked about her nightmares of 𝗏𝗼𝐼𝐻𝐬, and Tsuchan, being a good listener, reassured her that 𝗏𝗼𝐻𝐬 wouldn't bring her down easily. She thanked Tsuchan, who commented on how her dark circles were becoming quite pronounced. In their designated break room, the whole class waited. She sat on a stool, leaning against a table while listening to Tsuchan, Yura-chan, and Iida-kun talk, joining in when she felt like it. On the outside, she appeared calm, but inside, she was a bundle of nerves. Todoroki approached her, stating that out of everyone in their class, her quirk was the closest to his in strength. The room fell silent, and she could sense Kacchan's surprise. Todoroki declared his intention to challenge her, clenching his fist with determination. She accepted, leaning back against the table with a smile, warning him to be prepared for heavy opposition. As Class 1A was introduced, they walked out in a semi-organized crowd, with Tsuchan at her right and Yura-chan and Iida-kun at her left. They stood at the front, keeping an eye on 𝗟𝗵𝗸, who was likely to take advantage of the situation. Midnight called Kacchan up for the pre-festival announcement, which she found amusingly fitting for his personality. They waited for the signal to start running, their first activity being an obstacle course. She wished they could wear their hero suits, missing hers dearly. A gunshot rang out, and Midnight yelled for them to go. She leaped over the crowd using her quirk and made it out of the tunnel just as it closed behind her. Suddenly, she spotted 3 0-pointers and slid to a stop. She jumped onto one of the robots, narrowly avoiding Todoroki's ice as he froze the others. Rolling as she landed, she turned to see Todoroki charging toward her, but one of the robots fell toward their classmates. I launched back into a run, determined to beat Todoroki. The canyon was straightforward. I hopped from platform to platform and hit the other side running. Todoroki and I were neck and neck. I heard explosions behind me. Kacchan was catching up. I stopped in front of the minefield, searching for a better way to navigate it. Todoroki faltered but then began sliding past on his ice. Kacchan blasted past me. I took a few steps back, got a running start, and leaped with one for all. I landed in a safe spot, smirking to myself, knowing the mines were easy to spot if one paid attention. I quickly caught up to the other two, who flinched at my presence. With a mischievous grin, I activated Erasure, causing both of them to tumble forward, losing their momentum. Kacchan was the first to hit a mine, swiftly followed by Todoroki. I crossed the finish line, fully aware that they were fighting to close the gap, but they had lost too much ground. I passed the finish line without any issues. Yura-chan and Izuku congratulated me, and I frantically apologized to Kacchan for my actions, unable to suppress my laughter. He retaliated with a playful jab. We were allowed a short break to grab drinks before learning about the next event. Midnight announced the next challenge, cavalry battle. I sighed at her loud proclamation. It was like a normal cavalry battle. We would form teams of up to 4 and try to grab each other's headbands, which had points based on our previous event standings. The lowest team had 5 points, and the second to last had 10, with increments of 5. It seemed fair, but then Midnight revealed the twist. First place would have a staggering 10 million points. Everyone's eyes turned to me, filled with disdain and a longing for those points. I teamed up with Tokoyami, Yura-chan, and Hatsum. Our strategy was to dodge and keep our distance, ensuring we could secure first place by protecting my headband. I placed the headbands on with the numbers facing my neck and shuffled them around. Things were going smoothly until Todoroki imprisoned us with his ice, leaving us in a standoff. I maintained my Erasure on Ida, forcing them to stay at a distance. I challenged Todoroki, asking what was taking him so long. I closed my eyes and shrugged, teasing him about his predictability. I tapped Tokoyami's shoulder and he unleashed Dark Shadow, which sliced through an incoming ice attack. I pointed out how easy it was to read his moves. Ida attempted to use his engines again, but it failed, and I felt a slight ache behind my eyes, a side effect of using my quirk. My hair fell around my face as I smirked, and Ida lunged forward, almost toppling his team. I chuckled softly, encouraging them to come at us. As they charged, I easily directed my team to sidestep, but Todoroki managed to grab a headband. I looked down at Tokoyami, who asked if they had taken it. I replied that I wanted them to think they had succeeded. My team turned to face Todoroki's, and he hesitated at my smirk, glancing at the band in his hand. The alarm rang, signaling that Todoroki had taken the 130 headband. I hopped off my teammates' shoulders, praising their efforts. They celebrated our teamwork, and I laughed softly, feeling proud. The results were announced. First place went to Team Midoriya, followed by Team Todoroki, Team 𝐒𝐵𝐸, and surprisingly, Team 𝗛𝐿, which had come out of nowhere to claim 4th place. A break was announced for preparation for the final tournament and extra activities for those who wished to participate. Ojiro and a student from 1B dropped out of the rankings, stating they had no memory of the cavalry battle and did not want to take spots they hadn't earned. Shoji approached me, needing to share something important. He informed me about 𝗛𝐿, the purple-haired student from his team, whose quirk seemed to involve brainwashing and activated when someone answered him. He urged me not to respond to 𝗛𝐿 under any circumstances. I noticed Tsu-chan talking with Yura-chan and Toru-chan, so I approached them quietly. I complimented Tsu on her performance, and she blushed slightly at my praise. Yura-chan smirked at us, but I brushed it off, attributing my success to luck. My friends encouraged me not to downplay my abilities. Just then, Todoroki approached me with a calm demeanor, indicating he had something important to discuss. I said goodbye to the girls and turned my full attention to him. He asked if I was the quirk-created son of Mr. Aizawa and All Might. My heart raced at the implication, and I denied it, bewildered. He shrugged, noting my resemblance to them and speculating about the extent of my Quirk's abilities. Todoroki then shifted the conversation to Quirk marriages, and I felt a wave of disgust wash over me. I couldn't shake the memory of what Todoroki had shared about his past, realizing how deeply it had affected him. I refused to let him remain trapped in that darkness. As I stood at the entrance to the field, waiting for my name to be called, I felt anxious. I had a plan to help Todoroki, and it involved facing him in this tournament. The announcer's voice boomed, declaring the first battle of the freshman bracket, and I rubbed my temples, wondering why they had given the loudest person a microphone. The contestants were complete opposites. Hailing from Class 1A, first place of the obstacle race and the cavalry battle, was Midoriya Izuku. He stepped into the arena amidst loud cheers, trying to manage the noise. The other contestant, a Gen Ed student named Hitoshi Shinso, walked in with his hands in his pockets, seemingly unfazed. Midnight, the referee, cracked her WHP and explained the rules. Stepping out of bounds, being immobilized, or getting knocked out would mean losing. Both contestants nodded in understanding, and she signaled for the match to begin. Shinso commented on Izuku's powerful joint quirk, to which Izuku acknowledged with a smirk. Shinso then questioned why Izuku wouldn't just walk out of the arena. Izuku pointed out that Shinso must have known about his quirk, implying that was the reason for his challenge. Shinso fell silent, pulling his hands from his pockets, and Izuku noted that he had chosen the wrong opponent, given his Erasure quirk. With determination, Izuku launched himself at Shinso, using one for all in his right leg. Shinso raised his hands to block, but Izuku stopped short and kicked him on the side, causing him to stumble. Izuku declared that if it was going to be a fist fight, Shinso needed to give it his all. He deactivated Erasure and assumed a fighting stance. Shinso smirked and charged at him, displaying a competent posture that suggested he had trained for this moment. Izuku blocked a right hook and aimed a left punch at Shinso's abdomen, which Shinso nearly dodged. When Shinso attempted to punch Izuku, he sidestepped, causing Shinso to stumble forward. Izuku took the opportunity to kick Shinso's legs out from under him, making him fall. However, Shinso quickly rolled away and stood back up. Izuku complimented him, expressing pleasant surprise at his skills. Using one for all, he closed the distance and kneed Shinso in the stomach, sending him stumbling out of bounds and onto his back. The announcer declared Midoriya the winner, and the crowd erupted in cheers as Shinso sulked. Izuku offered his hand to help Shinso up, whispering that he had done amazing work, and he wasn't the only one who thought so. Shinso's eyes widened as he noticed the supportive cheers from the Gen Ed section. With a smile, he acknowledged the encouragement before walking toward the archway he had entered through, promising that this wouldn't be the last Izuku saw of him. As Izuku walked the halls of the stadium, he headed for a drink before joining his classmates. The next battle was set to be between Todoroki and 𝐼𝐼𝐻, and he anticipated it would be intense. He also found himself thinking about Tsuyu. Once he reached the stands with two waters in hand, he took his seat between Uraraka on his right and Tsuyu on his left. Ito was behind him, with Bakugo to his right. Kirishima was trying to engage Bakugo in conversation, along with Ishido. Izuku reflected on his favorite moments from the previous fights, 𝐼𝐻's struggle, Ito's mobile commentary, and the classic anime-style showdown between Kirishima and Tetsu. Uraraka was set to fight Bakugo, and Izuku could see her nerves as she prepared. He exchanged a concerned glance with Ida and followed her, hoping to calm her anxiety. He warned her that Bakugo wouldn't hold back, but reassured her that she could anticipate his moves. Despite his encouragement, Uraraka insisted that she would defeat Bakugo on her own, determination shining in her eyes. Though Bakugo won decisively, Izuku noticed that he acknowledged Uraraka's efforts, recognizing her as a worthy opponent, much like he did with Kirishima. After the first round, there was a break, and Izuku, Ida, and Tsuyu checked on Uraraka, who was pleased to hear she had performed better than he had at the same stage. As the second round approached, Izuku bid his friends farewell and made his way to the hallways of the stadium, only to encounter a familiar figure. The man glared at him, expressing disdain for his son's performance. He insisted that 𝗀𝐻 would surpass All Might, claiming that his quirk would lead to victory over Izuku. As the man attempted to walk past, Izuku grabbed his arm, but was shoved off. He confronted the man, questioning why he believed 𝗀𝐻 needed to defeat him if he wasn't All Might. The villain's expression shifted to one of anger mixed with fear as Izuku activated Erasure, making the flames around him vanish. Izuku turned away, deactivating his quirk and continuing toward the arena. He stood at the entryway, waiting for his name to be called. When it was, the crowd erupted in cheers as he stepped out. He strategized that if Todoroki had both fire and ice, his body must require balance to regulate temperature. He planned to exploit that weakness, determined to show Todoroki that he was not defined by his father. As Todoroki entered the arena, they exchanged steady gazes. The referee confirmed their understanding of the rules, and they both nodded in readiness. With the signal to begin, a blast of ice surged toward Izuku, who used one for all at full power in his pinky to create a gust of wind that countered the attack. I stood there with one hand held out and the other in my pocket. He caught himself with an ice wall before being pushed back by the wind. I walked forward with a straight posture, my hands still extended. He sent more ice my way, and I flicked my ring finger, shattering the ice. I ignored the pain. More ice came and I responded with my middle finger. More ice followed and I used my pointer finger. More ice appeared, and I popped my thumb against my cheek. I could see the ice forming on his other side, his breath visible in the cold air. It must be freezing over there, I thought. More ice came and I used my other pinky. I taunted him, suggesting he should warm himself up. I heard a growl, and more ice shot toward me. I countered with my other ring finger. He yelled that he wouldn't make me use his quirk. I gritted my teeth, confused by his words. How could it be his quirk? Todoroki seemed slightly taken aback but quickly recovered, sending more ice my way with my other middle finger. I challenged him, questioning how he could claim it was his if he possessed it. I reminded him that everyone had fought hard to get here, and he couldn't just hold back. He insisted he wouldn't break his oath, but I countered that it was his quirk. Silence fell over the stadium. I urged him to remember that he was not his father. He was his own person with his own abilities. I popped my other thumb against my cheek, and he flew back, catching himself with an ice wall that began to melt. Midoriya. Thank you, he murmured as his left side erupted in flames. I smirked, readying my right fist with one for all. I hoped he was prepared. He smiled back, and his right side erupted in ice, creating a blinding light. I slammed my feet into the ground for stability. As the dust settled, I found myself half-conscious, my broken fists buried in the concrete. I must have subconsciously used one for all to brace against the ground. I looked up to the opposite side of the arena, where Todoroki was slumped against an ice wall. I asked if he could move, and he nodded slowly, pulling his arms from the holes they had created. I checked on him, but the only movement from him was the rise and fall of his chest. The announcer declared Midoriya the winner by knockout, and I winced at the loud cheers from the crowd before passing out. When I awoke, we were in a break between rounds. I had won. Recovery girl examined my injuries. My left hand was fine, just a scar or two on my fingers, while my right hand was covered in scars but otherwise okay. She warned me that if I pulled any more stunts like that, she wouldn't heal me with her quirk. I nodded, understanding her decision. Ida-chan, Yura-chan, and Kacchan came to visit. Ida informed me that we were scheduled to fight first, but they had switched it to the second fight of the round to give me time to recover. I was sent out with my friends, warned that my right hand still needed rest. I could fight, but I had to be careful with it. Tsu-chan expressed concern over my scars, but I reassured her that I was fine. I told Ida-kun that I wouldn't accept it if he held back. He nodded, and we headed to our separate entrances to the stadium. Present Mike announced our names, but I tuned most of it out as we walked up. The signal to start the match was given, and Ida charged at me without using his quirk, which was a smart move. I prepared to jump over him with a boost from One for All. He aimed a knee toward my stomach, but I leaped over him, using 1% of my power to tussle his hair as I passed. He quickly turned and swung his right leg to catch my side, but I blocked it with my left. I grabbed his leg and threw him to the side with 5% of my strength. He caught himself and jumped at me with a boost from his engines, going for an axe kick. I waited until the last moment, sidestepped, and slammed my left fist into his stomach with 5%, sending him flying out of bounds. The announcer declared 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐽 the winner with a flawless victory. The final round was announced, and the excitement in the arena was palpable. I groaned, wondering why they had given the megaphone a louder megaphone. Present Mike introduced me as the user of the 𝐿𝐴𝐴/strength quirk, and I walked out, rubbing my temples. He then introduced my opponent, the 𝐒𝐿𝐴𝐴/haired 𝐾𝐿𝐴𝐴, who walked in with a scowl. I couldn't help but smile at Kacchan's reaction to the announcer's words. Both of us knew the rules, and the match began. Kacchan rushed at me with explosions, reminiscent of our previous battle trial, and I smirked. I activated 𝐿𝐴𝐴 and sidestepped, causing him to fly past me. I grabbed his arm, using his momentum to spin myself and throw him back with 5%. I charged at him without using one for all as he got up, jumping with both feet aimed at his chest. I landed on him, hearing him wheeze, then jumped off his chest with 2%, pushing him back down. He quickly recovered and threw a punch at my face, but I stepped back. His expression twisted in anger as he shouted about my quirk irritating him. I smirked and jumped back, deactivating 𝐿𝐴𝐴, and told him I would just use half of it. He rocketed forward, and I feigned a hit toward him. He blasted over my head and I crouched, feeling my hair singe slightly from the explosion meant for my back. As he touched down, I swept my leg back, catching him off balance. He stumbled, trying to regain his footing, but I tackled him and pinned his limbs. I smiled innocently at him as he growled in frustration. He shouted for me to get off him, but I was momentarily distracted by my eye drops. I blinked a few times and twisted the cap back on the bottle, apologizing for using my quirk so much that day. Kacchan took advantage of my distraction, pushing his palms down and unleashing a series of explosions that knocked me off him and sent him soaring above me. He aimed an explosion at me and I rolled, only my left arm getting caught. I stood and blocked his incoming fist, then locked his arm with my own and threw him over my shoulders. I followed up by jumping after him, and as he set off an explosion to avoid going out of bounds, I slammed a 3% axe kick against his shoulder, sending him crashing into the grass and out of bounds. I punched in front of myself and stumbled back, landing awkwardly on the ground. All Might announced the results of the first-year stage battles, declaring me, 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐽 Izuku, the champion. Kacchan took second place, and 𝗏𝐼𝐼𝐾𝐿 came in third. I noticed that Deku was missing, but All Might mentioned he had left due to an emergency. As Kacchan, 𝗏𝐼𝐼𝐾𝐿, and I walked to the 1A lounge, I could sense Kacchan's frustration over my victory, but I figured he would get over it soon. My mind, however, was preoccupied with concern for Iida. Leaving such an event must have meant something serious had happened. My worries intensified when I got home and saw the news report about one of the worst possible outcomes. The news anchor reported that the pro hero 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐽 had been found unconscious in an alley after failing to return from his morning patrols. He had regained consciousness only after other heroes arrived, stating that he believed his spine was broken. Panic surged through me. This was clearly why Iida had left. 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐽 was one of the few heroes who genuinely cared about people rather than just fame or money. The newscaster continued, revealing that 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐽's agency confirmed the attack was carried out by a man known as Hero Killer, 𝐒𝐮𝐱, who had already taken down numerous heroes. I struggled to focus on the rest of the report as new worries flooded my mind. The next day on the bus to school, I was recognized by some fellow students. It was strange to have attention on me, especially after being broadcasted for my performance in the battles. When I arrived at school, the atmosphere in the classroom was tense. Everyone seemed worried about Iida, but no one knew how to express their concerns. Deku presented the list of internship requests from agencies. He had received the most, followed by Kacchan, then 𝗏𝐼𝐼𝐾𝐿, and 𝐼𝐼𝐼𝐽. I was next, but my number of requests was significantly lower. The gap between the top three and me was evident, and it was even wider between me and the others. Some classmates voiced their surprise at the disparity. Then, our teacher announced that we would be choosing hero names, which lifted the tension slightly. Excitement filled the room as Midnight entered, passionately explaining the importance of our hero names. I had already decided on mine but wanted to hear what others would choose first. When it was my turn, I stood up, feeling a bit caught off guard. I noticed Ida's serious expression. He seemed troubled without a hero name. I flipped the whiteboard for the class to see and announced my choice. Erasure hero, Deku. I explained that while I had once thought Deku meant useless, a friend helped me realize it could also represent resilience. I wanted to be a hero that both quirked and quirkless individuals could look up to. Midnight smiled approvingly, and even our teacher, despite his usual demeanor, seemed pleased. At the end of the day, Yura-chan and I insisted on walking with Ida-kun, despite his protests. The walk was quiet until Ida suddenly reassured us that he was okay, just a bit shaken. Yura-chan nodded in understanding. I placed a hand on Ida's shoulder, wanting to comfort him but unsure how to address the unspoken tension. Later, 𝐼𝐼𝐬 pulled me aside to discuss his old teacher, a man who had once terrified him. I felt a chill at the thought of this individual. 𝐼𝐬𝐬 offered to help me learn to control my quirk more efficiently, especially since Ida would be heading to Hosu, where the villain stain had already caused chaos. The day for our internships arrived, and 𝐼𝐬𝐬 reminded us to keep our costumes hidden and to behave respectfully with the heroes we would be working with. As Ida started to walk away, Yura-chan and I jogged to catch up with him. We told him that if he ever felt hopeless or lost, he could always talk to us. He nodded, giving us a strained smile, and we continued on our way. He announced that he would see them in a week as he turned and continued walking. Izuku waved to Yura-chan as she boarded the train, then quickly turned back to 𝐼𝐬𝐬. He addressed his teacher, who looked slightly annoyed, and asked for permission to use his quirk freely during the upcoming week. 𝐼𝐬𝐬 paused for a moment, then confirmed that it was about Ida. Izuku nodded, and 𝐼𝐬𝐬 continued, stating that he would also need permission from the hero he would be interning with. Izuku smiled and bowed, thanking Mr. 𝐼𝐬𝐬 before turning to board the train, anticipating a challenging week ahead. As 𝐼𝐬𝐬 left the station to return home, he thought to himself that at least Izuku was observant and smart enough to figure things out on his own. He hoped that allowing this would not turn out to be a terrible mistake. The stress of the day called for some cat cuddles and sleep. Izuku stood outside the building, hesitantly confirming that the address matched the one on his map. He knocked on the door, and after a few seconds, he tried to open it. The door creaked open, and he cautiously stepped inside, calling out into the dark building. He introduced himself as Midoriya Izu from U.A. there for the internship, but was met with an unsettling sight, an old man lying on the floor. He approached the man, putting on a serious expression, and asked if he was okay. The man suddenly snapped his head up and demanded to know who Izuku was. Izuku introduced himself as 𝐼𝐬𝐬's successor and a hero in training sent to intern with him, speaking in a nearly robotic manner. The old man seemed unimpressed and gestured to Izuku's costume case, instructing him to put it on so he could see what he could do. Izuku nodded and headed upstairs to change. Once in his hero costume, he stood in the center of the living room, feeling the intense gaze of the old man. The man challenged him to demonstrate his abilities. In an instant, he dashed to the wall, catching Izuku off guard. The old man began bouncing off the walls, testing Izuku's reflexes and skills. He landed a punch on Izuku's cheek, and Izuku felt the impact but remained determined. The old man muttered about Toshinori's teaching methods as he looked down at Izuku, who was sprawled on the floor, feeling exhausted but not defeated. Izuku shook off the fatigue and slowly sat up, acknowledging the old man's comments about his adaptability and control over One for All. The old man then declared it was time for dinner, leaving Izuku momentarily confused. As they prepared to eat, the old man expressed exasperation over Izuku's calculations. Regarding his quirk's energy usage, Izuku explained how he could convert excess power into kinetic energy, but the old man interrupted, playfully scaring Izuku with his reaction. He tapped Izuku on the head with his cane, urging him to stop overthinking. Izuku stood outside, mapping out his jumps to the roof of the building next door. He muttered to himself about the calculations needed for his jumps, feeling a mix of excitement and determination. After several attempts, he finally made it to the roof, beaming with pride. The old man praised him from his own rooftop, but then reminded Izuku that using his quirk in such a way might not be legal. This realization struck Izuku. He had forgotten to ask for permission to use his quirks during the internship. He quickly jumped over to the old man's roof and bowed, requesting permission to use his quirks freely. The old man, surprised by the sudden question, listened as Izuku explained the situation with Stain and Ida's internship. After processing Izuku's nervous rant, the old hero granted permission to use his quirk only to ensure his friend's safety. He smiled slightly, reminiscent of the past, and noted how much Izuku resembled 𝗏𝗏. With a wave of his cane, the old man announced that they would be going on patrol the next day, emphasizing the importance of being well rested. He mentioned that they would be hunting criminals in Hosu, as the area was lacking in action, and they would keep an eye out for Ida. As they settled into a cab heading to the train station, Izuku texted Ida to check in on his internship. Ida replied promptly, expressing his satisfaction with Manuel's guidance. Izuku smiled at the typical Ida response. During the train ride, he decided to text Ida again, hoping for a quick reply. As the train announced their arrival in Hosu, Izuku checked his phone, noticing that Ida had not yet responded. The atmosphere felt tense as a joke about being a clingy girlfriend crossed my mind, but the reality was that Ida was likely in serious danger. The train came to an abrupt halt, and an announcement about delays was interrupted by a sudden breach in the wall of the train. A strange, spindly creature emerged, its exposed brain and multiple eyes sending a chill through the crowd. It was a 𝐼𝐻𝐬. A voice called out, warning me to be careful, and I turned to see Torino's quirk in action as he pushed the 𝐼𝐻𝐬 away. My heart raced as I steeled my nerves and jumped out of the train, an explosion echoing in the distance. I landed on a rooftop and began to leap from one building to another, but soon realized that taking the alleyways would be faster. I dropped down and used the walls to propel myself forward. A faint voice caught my attention, and I recognized it as Stain's. I slid in front of Ida, causing Stain to momentarily back off. My goggles and mouth guard were securely in place. Ida looked at me in disbelief, questioning my presence. I had been searching through the alleys for him, and I needed him to move. He admitted he couldn't, having been injured by Stain's quirk. I noticed another person slumped against the wall beside Stain, realizing I couldn't carry both Ida and this stranger while escaping. Ida urged me not to interfere, insisting this was not my fight. A wave of dread washed over me as I saw the turmoil in his eyes, emotions amplified to a breaking point. Stain taunted me, claiming it was his duty to eliminate us, and if it came to a fight, the weaker would fall. I felt a heavy weight of dread as I faced him, recognizing a dangerous idealism in his gaze. I regretted not bringing any pros along, but I couldn't involve other students. I had to test my limits. I told Ida I had much to say but that it would have to wait. I quoted all might, raising my fists and grinning beneath my guard, ready to confront Stain. Stain grinned back and I charged at him. He swung his long sword, and I slid under it, wrapping my legs around one of his ankles. Using my full cowl technique, I spun and slammed him to the ground. We both sprang back to our feet, and he retaliated with a vertical slash. I dodged to the right, narrowly avoiding another strike, and executed a Detroit smash aimed at his head. He managed to counter, bringing his blade up just in time, but I felt a sharp sting on my arm as I landed awkwardly. Realizing I had sustained a cut, I quickly pulled out my phone to send my location to the student group chat, knowing I needed backup. Stain commented on my maneuver, revealing he had more than one blade. I glanced at my arm, seeing the shallow cut bleeding slightly. Stain continued to taunt me, acknowledging my ability to track his movements but dismissing my power. He liked the blade, and a sudden numbness spread through me. I realized he was using his quirk to gain an advantage. He moved past me toward Ida, declaring him unworthy of help. Stain raised his sword and pressed it against Ida's forehead, threatening him. I shouted for him to stop as Stain carved a jagged line down Ida's face, eliciting a scream of agony. Just as Stain prepared to deliver a fatal blow, a wave of ice surged forward, forcing him back and creating distance between him and Ida. I sighed in relief as I recognized Todoroki, who had arrived just in time. Ida, in a defeated tone, acknowledged Todoroki's presence. Todoroki balanced his temperature, creating a wall of ice between us and 𝐼𝐶. I expressed my gratitude for his timely arrival, and he noted that my messages were never meaningless. With a powerful torrent of ice, Todoroki rushed at 𝐶, keeping him at bay. I slid down the slope of ice he created, aware that Ida and the other injured person were following suit. Todoroki's determination was clear as he vowed not to let 𝐶 draw any BLD today. If he ingests your BLD, you're paralyzed. Todoroki gets into a defensive stance in front of the three of them, explaining the presence of the blades. He knows he just has to keep his distance. He barely dodges a knife thrown right at his face, and a splash of BLD flies from his cheek, indicating that he was hit. Todoroki blocks an incoming slash with ice, and 𝐶 throws his sword upwards, glancing at it, which causes Todoroki to look away. The tension rises as 𝐶 gets dangerously close to Todoroki's wound. However, Todoroki unleashes a powerful eruption of ice and flame, forcing 𝐶 to retreat. Lying on his back and paralyzed, the protagonist closes his eyes, feeling helpless. Ida softly pleads for both of them to stop. Todoroki sends a torrent of ice at 𝐶, declaring that he has inherited his brother's name and must fight for it. 𝐶 retorts that the 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐬 he knows never made faces like that, hinting at a darker side to their family. Suddenly, the protagonist feels a twitch in his hand, confused about what is happening. The giant glacier created by Todoroki is cut to pieces, obstructing their view of the faster enemy. Struggling to get back on his feet, the protagonist wonders how he is already standing. He contemplates the possible reasons behind his recovery, considering factors like iron content or BLD type. As he watches two knives embed themselves into Todoroki's left arm, he sees 𝐶 aiming his sword at Todoroki while falling. Activating full cowl, he jumps against the wall, then to the opposite wall, and finally slams his foot into 𝐶's back, dragging him against the right wall and flinging him away. He lands and dodges an ice blast as Todoroki shouts a warning. Standing next to Todoroki, he explains that 𝐶 tasted their BLD and paralyzed them, but he was the first to break free. Detaching his mouthguard, he contemplates two possibilities: either the effects weaken with each person 𝐶 uses it on, or it has to do with the BLD's composition. Ida mentions his BLD type, and Todoroki shares his as well. 𝐶 acknowledges their discussion about BLD type but dismisses it as irrelevant to their situation. They realize they need to hurry and get their friends to safety, as 𝐶 is quick enough to react to their attacks. Until the promised heroes arrive, they must keep 𝐶 occupied and evade his strikes. The protagonist takes a deep breath, suggesting a risky plan where he will draw 𝐶's attention while Ida provides support. As they engage 𝐶, he slashes at the protagonist's knees, but he raises his legs and kicks 𝐶's face, which he blocks. They both land, and the protagonist attempts to sweep 𝐶's legs, but 𝐶 jumps and aims his sword at him. Todoroki's fire intervenes, stopping 𝐶's attack. Ida expresses his frustration, feeling overwhelmed. Todoroki urges him to stand up and fight. 𝐶 manages to cut the protagonist's chest diagonally, and as he feels the numbness creeping back, he apologizes to Todoroki, who sends a wave of ice at 𝐶, urging him to remember his aspirations. 𝐶 dodges the ice but continues his assault, narrowly avoiding a fire blast from Todoroki. He taunts Todoroki about relying too heavily on his quirk. Suddenly, Ida leaps into action, executing a spinning aerial kick that snaps 𝐶's sword in two. 𝐶 sidesteps and draws one of his longer daggers, but Ida quickly retaliates with a powerful horizontal kick that sends 𝐶 crashing into the alley wall. Izuku cheers for Ida, realizing that 𝐶's quirk isn't as formidable as they thought. Todoroki smirks, acknowledging that the situation has shifted. Ida, determined, declares that he won't let them lose any more BLD. 𝐶 stands ready to confront Ida, accusing him of being a fake hero driven by selfish desires. Just then, Izuku charges in, delivering a powerful punch to 𝐶's stomach, sending him backward. With his Erasure activated, Izuku recognizes that the battle is nearing its conclusion. Todoroki places a hand on Ida's shoulder, warning him not to heed 𝐼𝐮𝐻𝐻's twisted reasoning. 𝐒𝐮𝐻𝐬, however, admits that his actions haven't reflected a true hero, but he refuses to be broken, knowing that if he falls, 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐬 is truly lost. Todoroki unleashes a massive plume of fire at 𝐼𝐮𝐻, who narrowly avoids it. The downed pro warns them that 𝐼𝐮𝐻 is targeting him and the one in white armor, urging them to escape. Izuku joins 𝐒𝐮𝐻, noting that 𝐼𝐮𝐻's skill makes him dangerous, especially as he grows desperate with the impending arrival of the pros. 𝐒𝐮𝐻 asks Todoroki if he can regulate temperatures, explaining his need to freeze his leg without blocking the exhaust pipes. As 𝐼𝐮𝐻 jumps up, he throws a dagger at Todoroki, which 𝐒𝐮𝐻 intercepts with his arm, causing him to stumble. 𝐒𝐮𝐻 insists that Todoroki must proceed with the plan, urging him to act quickly. A punch in the face combined with whatever 𝐒𝐮𝐻 was doing would end this. Who needed arms? 𝐒𝐮𝐻 activated his 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗚. 𝐼𝐮𝐻 looked down at 𝐒𝐮𝐸𝐬 as the boy launched at him, swinging his leg in a powerful left kick to his right side, then caught Izuku out of the corner of his eye with his right fist coming from his left. The two powerful attacks landed with a sickening crack, sending 𝐼𝐮𝐻 into a violent mid-air cartwheel. Izuku cringed and held his right elbow, realizing he had slightly overdone it. 𝐼𝐮𝐻's eyes shot open, but before he could react, 𝐒𝐮𝐻 declared he would defeat him, identifying himself as 𝐮𝐻𝐻𝐬. He sent another kick into the villain's side as Todoroki unleashed flames at him. Todoroki created a slope for the three aerial combatants to slide down, ensuring 𝐼𝐮𝐻 got caught on some of the ice while his friends slid next to him. They stared at 𝐼𝐮𝐻's form on the ice, noting he looked out cold. They decided they should tie him up to be safe and wondered if there was any rope around, as Todoroki couldn't encase him in ice for long. They also agreed to take his weapons. Of course, they found rope in an alley. 𝐒𝐮𝐻 asked Todoroki to allow him to drag 𝐼𝐮𝐻, but Todoroki pointed out that 𝐒𝐮𝐻's arms were all messed up. 𝐒𝐮𝐻 expressed his regret for being in the way during the fight, acknowledging that anyone could have fallen victim to 𝐼𝐮𝐻's strength and quirk. Suddenly, 𝐼𝐻𝐻 appeared, startling them. He scolded Izuku for bringing another student into the mix, but upon realizing they had survived, he softened his tone. A group of pro heroes followed shortly after, and one of them recognized 𝐼𝐮𝐻 as the hero killer, leading to a discussion about what to do next. 𝐒𝐮𝐻 bowed deeply to his friends, apologizing for their injuries. Izuku, with a smile, reassured him that he should not blame himself, acknowledging the emotions he had seen in 𝐒𝐮𝐻's eyes. Todoroki urged 𝐒𝐮𝐻 to get himself together, reminding him of his role as class president. 𝐒𝐮𝐻 chuckled softly, wiping his eyes as he straightened up. 𝗟𝗏 suddenly yelled for them to get down as a villain approached, grabbing Izuku in its giant claws. He cried out and his friends screamed his name. Just then, a shadowed figure leaped onto the creature, delivering a decisive blow that incapacitated it. The hero killer breathed heavily, declaring his intent to purge the sham-filled society and the criminals who misused their power. Izuku felt pinned down by the hero killer's presence, but he was relieved to see 𝗟𝗏 and other heroes arriving. The villain's aura was intimidating, paralyzing him with fear. The hero killer's hatred towards heroes was palpable, and he proclaimed that only true heroes were allowed to kill him. The tension in the air was thick, and Izuku could see the horror reflected in his friends' faces as they realized the gravity of the situation. Later, as they recovered, they reflected on their incredible actions during the encounter. They marveled at their survival, especially given the danger they had faced. 𝗟𝗏 and Manuel entered the room, and after some light-hearted banter, they introduced Mr. Kenji Tsuragami, the chief of police. He acknowledged their bravery in stopping the hero killer but warned them about the legal repercussions of their actions. Todoroki stepped forward, passionately arguing that they had acted to save lives, questioning the validity of the law when lives were at stake. Izuku placed a bandaged arm in front of him, urging him to let the chief finish. The tension remained, but they understood the importance of the discussion ahead. That is all I am obligated to say as the chief of police. The real question is whether we should handle this issue publicly, he said, glancing at Midoriya. The only one here who can be considered to be acting within the law is you, Midoriya. You had permission for self-defense-related quirk usage from 2 pro heroes. Even so, we cannot allow any of you to be credited. If that were to happen, you would be celebrated by the public but face consequences. However, if we keep this matter to ourselves, the hero killer's injuries will support the narrative of 𝐿𝐴𝐼 and an anonymous underground hero being the key operatives, with 𝐿𝐴𝐼 receiving all the accolades. The chief's dog-like face seemed to wink. Fortunately, the low number of witnesses means we can easily suppress the true story. In this scenario, all your achievements and decisive actions will remain unknown to the general public. So, what do you say? I am an understanding man, and I would rather not pursue charges against such promising youths over this admittedly significant indiscretion. Manuel approached Ida, stating that their negligence was to blame and that they had to take responsibility. Ida bowed and apologized, receiving a light reprimand from the pro. Todoroki and Ida bowed to the chief and Gran Torino. When asked why he wasn't bowing, Todoroki explained that he had received permission from both the chief and Mr. Aizawa, so he felt no need to apologize. Besides all of that, as someone interested in keeping the peace, 𝗟𝗓𝐬𝐽 said while bowing, "I can thank you." Midoriya slid the door open, just finishing a phone call with Uraraka. Sue had not picked up, so he assumed she was enjoying her internship at sea. He entered the shared room with Ida and Todoroki. "Ida, I just got off the phone with Uraraka-chan and—" "Ida just got his diagnosis," Todoroki interjected, looking at Midoriya. Midoriya turned back to Ida, who had his head down. "My left hand could have permanent damage. Both my arms were significantly injured, but my left got the worst of it. They severed something called the brachial plexus nerve, but they said I might regain most of the feeling and use of my hand and fingers with a nerve transplant." Ida looked back up at Midoriya. "I may hate him, but he wasn't wrong. When I saw the hero killer, my mind went blank. I should have informed Manuel before doing anything." His expression shifted to one of conviction and determination. "My left hand will serve as a reminder until I succeed at becoming a true hero." Midoriya smiled widely at his blue-haired friend, holding out his heavily scarred right fist. "Then I guess we'll have to get stronger together." Right? Ida looked at Midoriya's hand and gently bumped his against it. "Also, if you ever feel like that again, just talk to me, alright? We're friends." "That goes for you too, Todoroki." Midoriya glanced over at the other hospital patient in the room, only to notice him sweating heavily as he stared at his hand. "Guys, I'm sorry." Ida and Midoriya stared at Todoroki, baffled. "Whenever I'm involved, it feels like people's hands get messed up. Or something. What? Midoriya replied, shocked but unable to suppress a slight giggle. "What on earth are you talking about?" Ida asked, amusement in his voice. "I'm like the hand crusher." Ida and Midoriya burst out laughing. "Guys, I'm serious." Aizawa noticed his blonde acquaintance and felt a wave of annoyance wash over him. He remarked that he was finally breaking down due to the loudness of his friend's voice, only half joking. Hisashi feigned tears, claiming that Aizawa was being mean. Aizawa returned his focus to the paperwork he was reviewing before being interrupted. He considered revealing his secret child and marriage but decided against it, knowing Hisashi's tendency to be loud and terrible at keeping secrets. Midnight was similar. She would likely use such information to blackmail him into buying her things or joining her and Hisashi for outings. Aizawa expressed his irritation, stating that it was annoyingly difficult to know Hisashi. He resumed sifting through the papers, contemplating how the recent stain incident made it impossible to keep his secret any longer. Izuku prepared for the upcoming challenge, listening as All Might explain the rules. He felt confident, having studied the movements of his classmates. Now that he could use his quirk throughout his body, he anticipated that employing faster techniques would be manageable. As he took his position, he waited for the signal, and when it came, he launched himself into action, propelled by green sparks. He noted that while 𝐼𝐼 was flying high, he preferred to stay closer to the pipes and roofs. The match was exhilarating, and Izuku felt a sense of accomplishment as he joined his classmates afterward. All Might approached him, praising his performance and asking to speak with him after class about important matters regarding One for All. In the locker room, Izuku was caught off guard when 𝗟𝗶𝗸 called out to him, showing off a hole that led to the girls' locker room. Izuku felt a surge of anger at the thought of peeking and prepared to confront 𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗏. Ida shared his disapproval, emphasizing that peeking was a serious offense. As 𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗏 continued his inappropriate comments, Izuku activated his quirk, grabbing him by the neck. He expressed his disappointment in 𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗏's behavior, hoping he would mature into a better person. As he entered the teacher's lounge, the attention of 𝐼𝐻𝐬, present Mike, and 𝐶𝐮𝐼𝐻𝐬 turned to him and 𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗏. Izuku explained the situation, revealing that 𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗏 had used the hole to spy on their female classmates. 𝐼𝐻𝐬 stood up, seemingly activating his quirk on 𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗏 as he approached. After Izuku left with 𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗏, the atmosphere in both rooms shifted. The boys felt intimidated by Izuku, while the girls were shocked, especially J2, who had narrowly avoided a confrontation with 𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗏. The girls discussed the situation, realizing that Izuku would not let such behavior slide. Meanwhile, 𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗏 was filled with dread. As he looked up, he found himself surrounded by a dark aura, illuminated by 2 pairs of glowing red eyes, making him realize the gravity of his actions. Of course, 𝐼𝐻𝐬 and Midoriya were both deeply disappointed in the behavior of this student. 𝐼𝐻𝐬 acknowledged Midoriya's concerns, expressing that if he spoke with any of the girls from Class 1A, he would surely gather plenty of testimonies against him. He then informed Midoriya that he would like him to stay after school to discuss the consequences further. While 𝐼𝐻𝐬's intention was to encourage honesty, he also found the idea of exchanging ideas with a fellow strategist quite appealing. Midoriya sat in the chair across from 𝐼𝐻𝐬, clearly nervous about what he had to say. He looked quite different from when he had been angry at Mineta. 𝐼𝐻𝐬 began lightly, apologizing for not being present during recent events. Midoriya quickly reassured him that it was okay, even admitting that he hadn't expected to fight 𝗏𝗏𝗏. 𝐼𝐻𝐬 mentioned hearing that 𝗏𝗏𝗏 had liked Midoriya's BLD, prompting a confused expression from the young hero. It didn't take long for realization to dawn on him. He abruptly stood up, visibly alarmed, and questioned whether 𝗏𝗏𝗏 had gained one for all. 𝐼𝐻𝐬 calmed him down, explaining that while DNA could pass on one for all, it could only be successfully transferred with the current bearer's consent. He added that it could be passed to an unwilling recipient, which seemed to relieve Midoriya. 𝐼𝐻𝐬 continued, stating that there was more he wanted to share about their quirk. Midoriya straightened up, respectfully waiting for him to elaborate. 𝐼𝐻𝐬 revealed that the quirk had not always been known as one for all. It had originated from a different quirk altogether. As summer vacation approached, 𝐼𝐻𝐬 informed the class that it would be irrational for them to take a month off. He announced that they would be participating in a summer training camp in the woods. The students erupted in excitement, especially Midoriya, who had snapped back to a small smile. 𝐼𝐻𝐬 quickly silenced them with his quirk, reminding them that if they did not pass the upcoming final exams, they would face summer school. The bell rang shortly after, signaling the end of class. 𝐼𝐻𝐬 turned to Midoriya with a grin, telling him to stay behind while the others left. Midoriya assured his friends that it was fine for them to leave without him, even as Todoroki waited for his approval. Once the classroom door closed, he turned to 𝐼𝐻𝐬, asking if they were expelling the student responsible for the inappropriate behavior. 𝐼𝐻𝐬 confirmed that the actions were illegal and that there had been multiple reports of harassment, humorously referring to the student as 𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗏. Taking a seat at 𝐼𝐻𝐬's desk, Midoriya learned that 𝐼𝐻𝐬 had more important matters to discuss. He reached into his sleeping bag and tossed an identical one to Midoriya, revealing a surprising connection. Midoriya's realization hit him like a bolt of lightning. 𝐼𝐻𝐬 was his father. His outburst startled 𝐼𝐻𝐬, who quickly urged him to keep it quiet. Midoriya, overwhelmed with excitement and questions, began to ramble about the implications of this revelation. 𝐼𝐻𝐬, clearly flustered, instructed him to look inside the sleeping bag. Midoriya unzipped the sleeping bag and discovered a plain box inside. 𝐼𝐻𝐬 explained that he had been waiting to share some items with him until he revealed the truth about their connection. As Midoriya opened the box, he marveled at its contents, pulling out a bottle of eye drops. He was thrilled to find that they were the same high-quality drops that 𝐼𝐻𝐬 used. 𝐼𝐻𝐬 confirmed that he spent a significant amount of money on them, emphasizing their effectiveness. With a huge smile on his face, Midoriya eagerly reached for the next item in the box, which turned out to be a piece of gear similar to 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐷's capture equipment. He excitedly asked if it was the same material, and 𝐒𝐮𝐬 confirmed that he would teach him how to use it properly during the training camp. Try and play it off as if he asked me to do it because he's a nerd or something. I can only tell he is joking by the smirk on his face. He mentions that he's going to accidentally call me 𝐷𝐷𝐸 at least once in class. He activates his quirk, but I make a point to look down to grab the last object. I pull out something I really wasn't expecting, a sleek black watch. I look up at my teacher questioningly. He responds that he thought I didn't know how to read analog watches. I clarify that I just expected something either Eraserhead-ish or out-of-character sentimental. He explains that the watch has a little button. I click a button that rests opposite the others, and the clock part swings open to reveal a locket-like setup. Inside, there's a picture of Mom looking up and a picture of 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐷, my father, opposite the clock. He informs me that he and 𝐒𝐮𝐽 are still legally married and that Hisashi Midoriya is a made-up man with a made-up quirk. He tells me that when I do tell 𝐒𝐮𝐽 about this, which I can, he doesn't know if she has a water bottle or anything for me. He wanted to get this out of the way because that fight with Stain shook him. He admits that he's man enough to acknowledge it. His tone turns somewhat somber. I close the watch and put it on my wrist, stuff the eye drops in my pocket, and put the sleeping bag in my backpack. I look at who I now know is my father and declare that I'm going to call him 𝐷𝐷𝐸 in private and in front of all might. As I open the door in preparation to run, I blurt out a final message about putting 𝗛𝐿 in this class before darting out of the room. I stop before the gate, spotting a familiar knot of green hair. I walk up at a normal pace and greet 𝐒𝐿. She turns to me as I pass through the gate and comments that I didn't really take that long. I smile slightly and tell her she didn't need to wait for me, but I appreciate it. I jab her arm lightly and start walking with her. After a couple of minutes, she breaks the comfortable silence by asking why I have Mr. 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐷's capture gear. I decide to confide in her, explaining that it was a present from him since he just told me I was his secret child. She responds that it's really obvious. I admit that I was just ignoring it and ask her not to tell anyone. She looks at me with her tongue slightly out and jokingly asks if that means he also gave me a sleeping bag to match. I confirm that he did and that I plan to use it often. She giggles at the ridiculousness of it. I realize I have a crush on her, which feels sudden. Is this what being a teenager is like? I then realize we've passed the train station. Yura-chan laughs nervously and comments that my dad looks really angry all the time. I assure her that he is a rather nice man once you get to know him. I explain that dad has trouble emoting. Ida-chan sits stiffly at the table in the middle of my room. My room has a waterbed against the right wall, and across from that is my desk against the left wall, where Izu-chan sits on a wheelie chair. Yura-chan sits next to me on my waterbed while Ida-chan looks between us. Izu-chan has put his feet up on my desk in a very awkward position. I comment that Ida-chan looks very stiff, and Izu-chan adds that he looks stiffer than usual. Ida-chan explains that he hasn't been to anyone else's room besides his own and his family's. Izu-chan suggests that we could crack open the books and study right now if it would make Ida-chan more comfortable. He readjusts into a normal position and reaches into his bag. Yura-chan asks where I got the fancy watch, jokingly noting that we are poverty pals. Izu-chan lies smoothly, claiming it's one of those knockoffs. Yura-chan asks if it's the 1,000 yen one, and Izu-chan nods while pulling out some textbooks from his bag. Ida-chan offers to support us financially, and I assure him I'm fine. Izu-chan waves a hand dismissively, while Yura-chan puts a finger on her chin, saying she'll keep that in mind. I also tell Ida-chan that I'm okay. Izu-chan slides off the chair and to the left side of the table, asking if we're getting this study party started. He lays a math textbook on the table and suggests we start with that since he and Ida are experts at math. Yura-chan groans, expressing her dislike for studying. I reassure her that we still have the rest of this week and another 2 weeks until the finale. Izu-chan reminds her that she has 3 nerds helping her. He makes an excuse about asking Mr. 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐷 to teach him to use the capture gear, so he got a spare to get comfortable with. I poke Yura-chan's cheek and tell her she heard him. She groans dramatically and falls back onto my bed. Ida-chan adjusts his glasses and insists we get back to where we left off. I hear a muffled voice asking if Midoriya seems to have fallen asleep in our absence. Yura-chan whispers that she doesn't think we should bother him. I realize I'm fully awake with my eyes closed, wishing I could go back to sleep. Right now, it's lunch, and no, I am not sleeping in the middle of the cafeteria. Midoriya was dozing off at his desk in the 1A classroom. His friends had left to grab lunch, choosing to eat in the classroom since 𝗟𝗏 wanted to have more study time. The quietness had lulled him into a light sleep. Aizawa was likely resting in the teacher's lounge. Sue, with a playful tone, commented on how cute he looked while sleeping. Midoriya felt his face heat up, realizing he had been caught. He glanced at Sue, who wore an innocent expression, and noticed 𝗟𝗏 and Ida looking slightly shocked. Todoroki, sitting nearby, nodded in agreement. Ida cleared his throat, breaking the silence. He informed Midoriya that he had brought him lunch, placing a tray with a bowl of katsudon on his. Midoriya thanked him, and Ida took a seat in front of him, with 𝗟𝗏 sitting next to him. Sue sat beside Midoriya, her packed lunch beside her, while Todoroki settled into the desk behind. Sue playfully remarked that she was joking about him looking cute while asleep. Midoriya waved his hand dismissively, and Todoroki expressed his genuine surprise that Midoriya had been awake. 𝗟𝗏 suddenly suggested they all have a sleepover after training camp, which everyone agreed would be enjoyable. Midoriya noted that it couldn't be at his or 𝗟𝗏's houses due to lack of space, and 𝗟𝗏 nodded in agreement. Ida proposed his room as a suitable location, mentioning he had enough space and even a two-person air mattress. Midoriya added that he would bring his sleeping bag, and 𝗟𝗏 bounced in her seat, excited about the idea. Midoriya found himself thinking about Sue more often, trying to process the feelings he had for her. Their friendship had deepened over time, and he recalled the times they had spent together. He questioned his thoughts as he stared at the ceiling, realizing he had been awake for hours. Later, he received a text from Sue, teasing him about being up late. They exchanged messages, and Midoriya reflected on how their friendship had changed. He noted that he hadn't spoken to Katsuki much lately, pondering why they had drifted apart. During a casual hangout with Sue, Midoriya lay on the floor of her bedroom in his sleeping bag. Sue teased him about being Mr. Aizawa's son, prompting him to poke his head out of the sleeping bag and respond. They both acknowledged that they had exhausted their usual topics of conversation and found comfort in sharing silence. Midoriya felt a sense of ease being with her, despite the confusing feelings of a teenage crush. As he contemplated their friendship, he realized he appreciated the quiet moments they shared. Sue giggled softly, and he noticed a blush on her cheeks, which made him smile. Suddenly, he called out to Ida, startling his friend on the other end of the phone. "What is wrong?" He sounded frantic now, expressing a massive issue. He mentioned feelings for Tsuchan, and the urgency in his voice was clear as he declared he was coming over. Despite never having been to Midoriya's house, Ida arrived quickly, almost startling Midoriya's mom when he knocked rapidly. Midoriya let him in and quickly introduced him to his mom before leading him to his room. Midoriya explained that his feelings for Tsuyu began during his stay with Mr. Aizawa after a troubling incident. He made Tsuchan giggle, and suddenly he felt something more than friendship. Ida listened intently, noting that it seemed sudden, but Midoriya reflected that it had been building for some time. He described how comfortable he felt with her, how her laughter made him giddy, and even how he once dreamt of her as a pond goddess. Ida advised that keeping these feelings bottled up could hinder their friendship and suggested that expressing them might relieve tension. Midoriya expressed uncertainty about whether he truly liked her or if it was just a fleeting crush, not wanting to jeopardize their friendship. Ida, nodding thoughtfully, suggested waiting until after the training camp to assess his feelings, reassuring Midoriya that Tsuyu would likely remain his friend regardless. Midoriya then asked Ida why he was so passionate about the topic, to which Ida admitted that both of them were his friends and he secretly supported their potential relationship. As the last week of June approached, the pressure of final exams loomed. Kaminari lamented his lack of studying, while Mina nervously laughed beside him. Midoriya watched from his desk, with Tsuyu leaning against it. Kaminari's worries about the exams were palpable, and when Midoriya offered encouragement, their hopes were dashed when he suggested they all attend training camp instead. Ida, oblivious to the teasing undertones, enthusiastically agreed, while Todoroki questioned how they could possibly fail if they had been attending class. Yaoyorozu interrupted Midoriya's playful banter by offering academic help to Kaminari and Mina, and Yura-chan rushed over to Ida, asking about their study plans. Ida, caught off guard, stammered his agreement, while Midoriya playfully teased them about a private study session. Tsuyu, sitting atop Midoriya's desk, joined in on the teasing, which caused Yura-chan to blush. Ida, flustered, suggested that if they wanted to join, he would be happy to have them, recalling how enjoyable their last study session had been. Midoriya, still grinning, dismissed the idea, urging Ida to calm Yura-chan down as class was about to start. As class began, Midoriya mused about the upcoming academic test, confident it would cover everything they had learned. Ida expressed his belief that nothing unusual would come up, while Yura-chan voiced her concerns about the academic material. Midoriya encouraged her, shaking his head at her self-doubt. Hagakure chimed in, suggesting it would likely be a comprehensive test, and Tsuyu confirmed that was what Mr. Aizawa had indicated. Yura-chan counted their training topics, and Midoriya suggested they could also incorporate workouts into their study routine. However, he was interrupted by a sudden smack to the back of his head. Turning slowly, he encountered a boy he had never seen before, who apologized for the collision. Midoriya's irritation flared as he recognized the boy as Monoma from Class B. Monoma began to taunt them about their encounter with the hero killer, and Midoriya felt his temper rising. He stood abruptly, shocking Monoma, who stumbled back. Midoriya challenged him to continue speaking about their near-death experience as if it were a joke. Monoma hesitated, and as Midoriya stepped closer, Ida and Todoroki grabbed his arms, urging him to sit back down. Only bad things would come from this. After a moment of shock, the protagonists deactivated their quirk and sighed. They reminded the kid that misfortune wasn't a path to popularity. Just as they were about to take a seat, a red-headed girl appeared from behind Monoma, inquiring about his latest antics. Monoma flinched at her voice, but before he could respond, she delivered a light chop to the back of his neck. The protagonist apologized for Monoma's behavior, explaining that he simply didn't understand the situation. The girl nodded and directed her voice toward Monoma, reminding him of what had happened to Ida and urging him to be more aware. She then turned back to the protagonist and their group of friends, introducing herself as Kendo Itsuka. With a friendly smile, she mentioned overhearing their concerns about the practical exam and shared that an older student had informed her it would involve battling robots, similar to the entrance exam. The protagonist felt uneasy about this information, suspecting that the exam would not remain unchanged given the recent rise in villain activity. They expressed that while gathering intel was acceptable, it likely meant the exam would be more complex than anticipated. With a tired smile, they settled back in their chair, their fingers brushing against the unopened eye drops in their pocket. Monoma muttered something unintelligible, prompting another swift chop from Itsuka to silence him. The protagonist noted that she seemed like the big sister of Class B. A hand touched their own, and they looked up to see Tsu's worried eyes. Tsu asked if they were okay, to which the protagonist nodded, admitting they weren't in the mood to deal with Monoma's antics. The protagonist allowed their friends to share the new information with the rest of the class while they leaned back against the window, eyes closed. They contemplated the possibility of being pitted against each other again, perhaps with some teachers acting as hostages. It could also be a test for 𝗪𝐿 to finally join their class. The thought of fighting teachers made them uneasy. Suddenly, a loud voice broke through their thoughts. Kacchan was yelling, clearly agitated. He turned his fierce gaze toward the protagonist, expressing frustration over their quirk management. The protagonist approached him, trying to decipher the emotions behind his glare. Kacchan declared he wouldn't settle for second place this time and that he intended to defeat the protagonist decisively. The protagonist felt a pang of confusion, wondering what had caused Kacchan's sudden intensity. The rest of the week was filled with last-minute studying, leading up to the written portion of the exam. The atmosphere in the room was tense, but it eased afterward when Kaminari and Ishido expressed their gratitude to Yaoyorozu. Finally, the day of the practical exam arrived. The instructor announced the start of the practical exam in a nonchalant manner, but the sight of the teachers heightened the protagonists' anxiety. They sighed, bracing themselves for what was to come. The instructor warned that failing the exam could jeopardize their attendance at the training camp, scanning the class and lingering on the protagonist's face. It seemed he recognized that they had already figured out the situation. Kaminari and Ishido excitedly shouted out their thoughts, but the protagonist felt a sense of dread, knowing the implications of the exam. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 emerged from the instructor's scarf, surprising the protagonist. He explained that the exam format had been revised due to various circumstances. The two excited students froze in fear as 𝐒𝐮𝐬 clarified that the focus would now be on battles against living opponents, emphasizing the need for practical experience. The students would be paired up to fight one of the teachers present. The protagonist hoped they wouldn't be matched against All Might. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 continued, revealing that one student would also be paired with a complete stranger. The protagonist felt a mix of relief and concern when 𝗛𝐿 appeared, acknowledging the class before turning to the teachers. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 announced the matchups, starting with Todoroki and Yaoyorozu against him. The protagonist felt sympathy for them but had no time to dwell on it. When their own name was called, they realized they would be paired with Kacchan. The shock on Kacchan's face mirrored the protagonist's own confusion. The instructor revealed that their opponent would be All Might, who stepped forward with enthusiasm. The protagonist felt a sense of dread at the thought of facing the number one hero. As the matchups continued, the protagonist's mind raced. Kacchan's anger over their progress weighed heavily on them, and the prospect of battling All Might was daunting. They resolved to uncover what was troubling Kacchan before the exam began. The instructor announced that 10 stages had been prepared and that all teams would start simultaneously, with guidelines to be explained by their respective opponents. The protagonists steeled themselves for the challenges ahead. Kacchan chose to sit at the far corner of the bus, leaving me puzzled about his mood. I couldn't see his face, which made it hard to decide whether to approach him or not. Was he upset because I hadn't been talking to him? Normally, he would initiate our conversations or insist that we hang out. But lately he hadn't done either. Did he dislike how strong I had become? He had never been fond of my quirk, and now that I had one for all, did he think I was trying to outpace him? No, Kacchan was too confident for that. All Might suggested they could play a word game, but I felt bad for him. Our relationship was strained at the moment. Then he announced that it was time for the final exam. Kacchan stood a foot to my left, growling that it was impossible for us to defeat him. All Might, in his authoritative tone, explained the rules. We had 30 minutes to either put 𝐻𝐿 on him or have one of us escape the stage. He emphasized that this was meant to simulate a real battle, where running away and calling for help could be a valid strategy if we felt overwhelmed. Kacchan was clearly frustrated, insisting that finding and defeating All Might was the best option. I countered that avoiding a fight with the number one hero would leave us with fewer injuries. Kacchan, however, was determined to wait until All Might was exhausted before making his move. I hesitated, realizing he might have a plan, but I also knew that All Might's handicap wouldn't be enough to level the playing field. As we prepared for the exam, All Might's presence loomed large, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still faster and stronger than us, even with the added weight. The countdown began, and I glanced at Kacchan, who was heading toward the exit gate. I rushed to catch up with him, questioning his intentions. He snapped back, insisting that his plan was the best. I tried to reason with him, but our argument escalated until a powerful wind swept through, forcing us to brace ourselves against the onslaught. All Might emerged from the dust, declaring himself a villain and showing no concern for the destruction around us. He had easily tracked us down, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Meanwhile, 𝐼𝐻𝐿 was trying to get to know 𝗛𝐿, who had fought Midoriya during the sports festival. 𝗛𝐿's expression was indifferent as he revealed his quirk was brainwashing. The atmosphere between them was awkward, but 𝐼𝐻𝐿 was determined to break the silence. He asked about 𝗛𝐿's voice changer, which was essential for his quirk since it didn't work through electronics. 𝗛𝐿 demonstrated his ability to imitate voices, leaving 𝐼𝐻𝐿 impressed. As they prepared for their test, Midnight, the R-rated hero, approached them, her presence commanding. 𝐼𝐻𝐿 activated his visor to protect himself from her quirk, while 𝗀𝐿 adjusted his mask. 𝗂𝐿 launched tape at midnight, but she effortlessly cut it with her WHP. The tension rose as she approached, and both boys braced themselves for the challenge ahead. 𝗂𝐿 quickly formulated a plan, instructing 𝗀𝐿 to distract Midnight while he prepared his next move. Despite the danger, they were determined to work together and pass the exam. The moment the hero answered out loud, she fell under 𝗀𝐿's control. He instructed her to wait until their victory was announced. Midnight was muttering to herself, feeling embarrassed and confused about why RG would be present and why only one test was halted. Izuku was completely at a loss for what to do. Katsuki was angry with him for no apparent reason. All Might was acting like a villain, and he couldn't use the Erasure part of Erasure without revealing All Might's true form to Katsuki. With no other options, he decided to grab Katsuki and run. Izuku latched onto Katsuki's arm and activated full cowl, but before he could escape, All Might delivered a punch that sent them flying. Katsuki, fueled by determination, charged at All Might, ignoring Izuku's protests, and aimed for the pro's side, declaring his intent to defeat him. However, All Might countered with a powerful move to Katsuki's abdomen, causing him to gasp and stumble back. Izuku then appeared out of nowhere and landed a full power punch on All Might's face, sending the hero crashing into a building. Izuku wondered if Katsuki had aimed for All Might's injury intentionally or if it was just a lucky shot. He rushed back to Katsuki, who was struggling to get up, and slammed his fist into the blonde's stomach. Katsuki slumped in pain as Izuku hoisted him onto his shoulder and took off. He whispered urgently that they needed a plan before confronting All Might again. All Might quickly recovered, noting that Midoriya had grown stronger, but it wouldn't matter if he couldn't rein in his friend. Katsuki yelled in frustration, questioning why Izuku had attacked him. Izuku's tone was different, causing Katsuki to freeze. He expressed his feelings of inadequacy, lamenting how he felt left behind by others, including Izuku. Izuku reassured him that he wouldn't be left behind and suggested that this was a moment of humility for Katsuki. Katsuki, feeling cornered, punched the ground in frustration, insisting that his goal had always been to be number one. He leaned against a wall in the alley they had retreated to, while Izuku sat across from him. Izuku reminded him that being a hero wasn't just about winning and that even the best heroes faced challenges. Katsuki reflected on his past behavior, admitting he had been an arrogant JRK. Izuku offered his hand, and Katsuki accepted it with a smirk, ready to hear Izuku's plan. The silence of the battlefield made All Might uneasy. He wondered if the boys had somehow taken each other out. Suddenly, 𝗏𝐿 appeared in front of him, launching an attack with a gauntlet. The explosion engulfed All Might, blocking his power. Izuku took advantage of the chaos, encouraging 𝗏𝐿 to move quickly. They raced toward the exit, using their abilities to evade All Might. The announcement declared them the winners, and Izuku's hair fell back into place, partially obscuring his eyes. 𝗏𝐿 celebrated with a fist bump, but Izuku felt a mix of emotions watching his classmates struggle. He tried to comfort them, suggesting that Mr. Aizawa would rationalize the situation. 𝗂𝐿, also trying to lift spirits, lamented his own failure in the test. Aizawa entered, announcing that the bell had rung and everyone should take their seats. He informed them that while everyone had passed the written test, several students had failed the practical. Izuku noted that clearing the practical didn't guarantee passing, which made him feel a bit better about 𝗂𝐿's disappointment. Aizawa explained that the tests were designed to push them, and those who failed would benefit from the upcoming summer training camp. He added with a hint of mischief that it was all part of a rational deception. Aren't you worried that their trust in him has been shaken, now that they had been lied to twice? Perhaps. But he urged them to consider the facts. The 5 failed students were going to be put through something worse than summer school, special supplemental classes. So it wasn't technically a lie. Everyone was relieved that they still got to go. The packing list was rather long, and Achiko counted on her fingers, feeling the pressure. She realized she would need to get half of the items. Ida nodded, confirming that it was for a full week of training camp. Kaminari groaned, expressing his concern about not even having a bathing suit and the long list of things he needed to buy. Toru jumped around excitedly, gaining the attention of the whole class. With the tests over and the day off tomorrow, she proposed a big Class A shopping trip. Denki enthusiastically agreed, recognizing it as a first for them. Bakugo scoffed, dismissing the idea as a waste of time, but Kirishima urged him to join, insisting it would be fun. Mina chimed in, trying to convince Bakugo, who scoffed again and turned away. Izuku felt a sense of satisfaction knowing they had swayed him a little. He turned to Todoroki, the relatively new addition to his circle of friends, and asked if he would join. Todoroki mentioned he visited someone on weekends, and Izuku nodded, understanding. They arrived at Kiyoshi Ward Shopping Mall, and Mina excitedly announced its vast array of stores and trendy items. Tsuyu bumped into Izuku slightly and asked what he would get first. He mentioned he was looking for heavy wrist weights. Kirishima suggested they split up to meet back at the center fountain, and everyone agreed. The Baku squad rolled out, along with various duos and trios. Tsuyu and Achiko exchanged a look and separated from the group. After a bit of shopping, Tsuyu and Izuku decided to take a break. They claimed a bench for themselves, and Izuku offered to get drinks from a nearby vending machine. Tsuyu agreed, asking for a water while she kept an eye on their things. Unbeknownst to Izuku, someone was following him. As he picked up the bottle of water, a voice interrupted him, recognizing him as the first-place winner from the sports festival. Before he could turn around, an arm wrapped around his shoulders, and unease washed over him. They were in a secluded spot. The voice continued, expressing surprise at meeting him again, and Izuku felt dread creeping in. He realized the last time he had seen this person was during the attack on the USJ. The figure introduced himself as Shigaraki, and Izuku felt a chill run down his spine. He was aware that he couldn't erase Shigaraki's quirk in this situation. Shigaraki warned him not to squirm, implying that any sudden movement could lead to dire consequences. He forced Izuku to start walking alongside him, instructing him to act like they were old friends. Izuku maintained a neutral expression, though he felt tense and anxious. Meanwhile, Tsuyu was growing increasingly worried about Izuku's delay. She decided to follow the path he had taken, feeling a pit form in her stomach. Shigaraki continued to speak, expressing his disdain for the hero killer, revealing that he never agreed to work with him, despite society's perception. He lamented that the hero killer overshadowed him, and no one seemed to notice his actions. Izuku focused on calming his breathing, sensing Shigaraki's growing hostility. He understood that Shigaraki was searching for validation and felt compelled to respond. Izuku took a deep breath and expressed that he couldn't accept Shigaraki's actions or understand them. However, he did understand the hero killer to some extent, acknowledging that while his methods were destructive, they were driven by a purpose. He mentioned that both of their paths began with All Might, who had even saved him. Shigaraki's demeanor shifted, and Izuku felt the tension rise as he caught a glimpse of the unsettling grin on Shigaraki's face. Tsuyu spotted Izuku's green hair from a distance and noticed he was with someone else. She felt a mix of relief and concern, as Izuku appeared extremely uncomfortable. She hurried toward them, determined to intervene. Shigaraki continued to speak, revealing his realization about why the hero killer irritated him and why Izuku was equally bothersome. It all seemed to stem from All Might, and as Izuku turned his head, fear washed over him at the sight of Shigaraki's menacing grin. The reason why everyone smiles and continues living their lives despite the constant danger is because All Might always has that unwavering grin on his face, as if to say there's no one he can't save. Shigaraki tightens his grip on Izuku's neck, causing the boy to stiffen. He expresses his satisfaction with their conversation, clearly enjoying the moment. Izuku, feeling terrified, notices Tsuyu approaching with their belongings. He worries about her safety and urges her to stay back, insisting that he is fine. Suddenly, the grip on his throat releases, and he gasps for air. Tsuyu quickly realizes who is with Izuku, her eyes widening in alarm. As Shigaraki prepares to leave, he warns Izuku about their next encounter, suggesting it will not end well for him. Shigaraki then vanishes into the crowd, prompting Tsuyu to call the police. The mall is temporarily shut down while the police and heroes search for Shigaraki, but he remains elusive. Izuku recounts the entire conversation to Detective 𝐼𝐻𝐬, who is part of the new team handling League of Villains cases. Izuku understands that even the symbol of peace, all might, cannot save everyone, as he is still human. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 arrives at the station in tears to pick Izuku up. Despite his reassurances, her worries persist, which is understandable given the circumstances. Due to the recent events, the school is on high alert for villains and had to cancel their usual accommodations at the last minute. The class reacts with surprise, as many had already informed their parents about the trip. Izuku, unfazed by the situation, insists that they should not cancel the trip entirely. Katsuki suggests that Izuku should have dealt with Shigaraki more harshly, but Izuku quickly reprimands him, explaining the potential collateral damage in a crowded mall. Katsuki growls in response, acknowledging that Izuku is right. Izuku spots 𝗀𝐿 with Aizawa in the hallway and waves at him. 𝗀𝐿 looks back with a neutral expression, but Izuku can see the excitement in his eyes. Some Class A students are receiving extra lessons, which prompts Nito to make a teasing remark about their performance. Izuku interrupts him, pointing out that Nito is not in a position to criticize. Kendo swiftly knocks Nito out, and other Class B students reassure Class A, receiving thanks in return. The students are informed that 𝗀𝐿 will be joining them for training, and he is assigned to sit next to Izuku on the bus. As they prepare to leave, Izuku puts in an earbud, keeping one free for 𝗀𝐿. He playfully asks if 𝗀𝐿 is excited to become a better hero, to which 𝗀𝐿 responds with a scoff, affirming his commitment to that promise. When they arrive at the training site, Izuku recognizes 𝐒𝐮𝐬 and 𝗶𝐵𝐸𝐵 as the wild pussycats, noting 𝗶𝐵𝐸𝐵's sensitivity about her age. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 explains that this area is their territory, and Izuku warns Tsuyu that they might soon be thrown into the forest. As the students prepare to head to their lodging, Izuku discreetly informs Tsuyu and 𝗀𝐿 to get ready. Suddenly, some students panic and start running back to the bus. Izuku takes charge, leading Tsuyu and 𝗀𝐿 as they leap over the rail and use their gear to navigate the terrain. They manage to land safely, while others either use their quirks or fall safely to the ground. The students are informed they have 3 hours to reach the facility on foot and must navigate through the beast's forest. As they regroup, Izuku shakes off the dirt and explains that the creature they encountered is part of 𝗶𝐵𝐸𝐵's quirk, signaling the start of their training. Ida takes the lead, organizing the group based on their quirks. Izuku, Ida, and Yamamoto position themselves at the front, while Todoroki, Katsuki, and Kirishima take the back. The rest of the students are assigned to different flanks, with Koda and Shoji acting as backup. The training is about to begin, and they are ready to face the challenges ahead. Any of those who also wish to help despite their quirk disadvantages can provide support to any flank. Izuku tossed the clipboard aside, feeling confident about the plan. The response from his classmates was enthusiastic. The students emerged from the forest, looking exhausted and dirty, especially the main attackers who were dealing with the aftermath of their quirks. Izuku's capture gear was soiled, and his arms and legs bore scratches. Katsuki's hands were red and twitching, likely from the strain of battle, and his palms were singed. Ida had bruises and scratches on his legs, while Todoroki limped on his right leg. Achiko looked pale, Aoyama clutched his stomach in discomfort, Denki appeared dazed, Ojiro's tail was marked with cuts, Jiro's jacks were bruised, Koda held his throat in distress, and Mina's skin was flushed from overexertion. Siro expressed his disbelief about the time they had spent, feeling starved. Kirishima wobbled, complaining about hunger. Sata questioned the speed of their arrival, and 𝗶𝐵𝐸𝐵, with a mischievous grin, remarked on how they had underestimated the students. She pointed out the 4 who had acted decisively, hinting at their potential for the future. Izuku and Katsuki dodged her playful advances, with Izuku expressing his interest in someone else, while Katsuki simply wanted to focus on food. Izuku noticed a young boy with a horned hat and a scowl, whom he vaguely recognized. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 introduced him as her nephew, Koda, and encouraged him to greet the students. Izuku crouched down to introduce himself, but Koda attempted to punch him, which Izuku skillfully dodged. Koda stumbled into Izuku, who embraced him, acknowledging the boy's spirited nature. As Koda walked away, 𝐒𝐮𝐬 questioned his actions, to which Koda growled that he couldn't stand those who wanted to be heroes. The classmates reacted with surprise at his boldness, and Katsuki found the situation amusing. Aizawa interrupted the banter, instructing the students to retrieve their luggage from the bus and prepare for dinner. Afterward, they would have time to bathe before bedtime, with real training starting the next day. Grateful for the meal, Izuku and a few others quickly dug in. The atmosphere was lively, with Kirishima and Denki particularly enthusiastic about the food. Izuku noticed Mandalay speaking to Koda again, and Tsuyu commented on Izuku's ability to connect with others. Katsuki, irritated by the idea of Izuku having multiple quirks, jokingly threatened him, while Izuku shrugged it off, teasing Katsuki in return. As they relaxed, Koda seemed nearly asleep next to Tokoyami, who maintained a serious demeanor. Izuku waved at Tokoyami, teasing him about his tension. Kirishima playfully scolded Izuku for his teasing, but the light-hearted atmosphere continued. Katsuki entered the hot spring, prompting Izuku to blush at the thought of the girls nearby. Aizawa instructed Izuku and Hitoshi on the proper use of the capture gear, and Izuku felt a mix of excitement and nervousness being under Aizawa's watchful eye. He had studied the capture gear extensively, and while his knowledge was basic compared to Aizawa's expertise, it was a start. At least his previous knowledge had helped him grasp the basics more quickly, and although Izuku sensed that Aizawa was trying to hide it, it seemed to be making his father proud. Soon, Aizawa would have them switch to quirk training and workouts, with 𝗫𝐿 facing a more challenging routine for obvious reasons. Izuku could detect the sadistic tilt in Aizawa's voice, something he recognized in himself as a fellow SST. He noticed 𝗫𝐿's reaction, indicating that he had picked up on the undertone as well. Izuku groaned as he slowly lowered himself with his final push-up of the set, counting silently to 50. His hair fell for a moment, but he quickly reactivated his quirk, keeping it focused on Hitoshi. The purple-haired boy was currently struggling with his running, completing what seemed like an endless number of laps around the edge of Izuku's Erasure range. Aizawa had mentioned that Hitoshi needed more physical training than anything else, and Izuku could benefit from learning to multitask better with his quirk. The strength aspect would also be addressed, but not today. Izuku barely had time to register what everyone else was doing for their training, but the yells of discomfort and constant groans suggested it was equally challenging for them. It felt as if he were staring at the sun, which was squeezing his brain and painfully testing his muscles. As they had stated the previous day, there would be no more freebies. Now they had to make their own curry. Izuku barely registered what the cat-themed heroine had said before horror washed over him. He had no idea how to cook anything. Some of his classmates expressed surprise that 𝗫𝐿 could cook. Izuku smirked, quickly realizing that Katsuki and 𝗫𝐿 were glaring at each other. A cooking contest had likely been initiated by Kacchan, knowing his tendency to turn everything into a competition. The two boys who had made a show of competing against one another stood before him, and he chuckled as they glared at each other. He agreed to be the impartial judge, and he could hear Tsuyu giggling beside him. He sighed as the two dishes were placed in front of him. He took a bite of Katsuki's curry first, already knowing it would be good. The 𝗂𝐿 Katsuki was known for were present, but he remained neutral in his expression. Then he tasted Hitoshi's curry and couldn't hide his surprise. The flavors were remarkably similar. He looked at both of them, who wore stunned expressions. Even down to the 𝗂𝐿s, they tasted the same. Everyone else shared surprised looks, and the two cooks exchanged narrowed glances. This had certainly been an interesting revelation. Izuku then turned his gaze to the 𝗏𝐿, spotting Koda as he walked into the forest with his small hands tucked in his pockets. He realized the boy hadn't eaten yet and shouldn't be trying to starve himself. Tsu urged him to go and save Koda, and Izuku, with a smile, stood up, curry plates in hand. He thought that while gaining the boy's trust might take time, having some company could help him. The other contestants gathered around Izuku, maintaining a respectful distance. The robot boy lingered at the back, his mind racing with thoughts. A kind girl rested her head on the three-pointer's shoulder. A small woman entered the scene, her voice cheerful and high-pitched as she praised the contestants. She handed out gummies to one of the boys before approaching Izuku. The blonde boy from earlier spoke up, noting her importance. She glanced at Izuku's bruised arm and injured legs, concern evident on her face. It seemed his body was still adjusting to his quirk. With a playful expression, she activated her quirk, her lips elongating as she gently kissed Izuku on the head. The onlookers were taken aback, murmuring in surprise. The blonde boy continued, introducing her as 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐬𝐃𝐞�𝐚𝐢𝐥𝐬, licensed school nurse, the youthful heroine known as Recovery Girl. A healing green glow enveloped Izuku's arm and legs as she worked her magic. The blonde boy then asked if anyone else was injured, eager to ensure everyone received care.